I got off the bus with my bag over my shoulder and Uncle Thomas's keys poking into my palm. Blue Ridge sat between mountains that crowded too close, like they were trying to squeeze the life out of the town. Only one other person got off with me, an old woman who rushed away without looking back. The bus drove off, leaving me on the cracked sidewalk of what passed for Main Street. 3 buildings down was the sheriff's office, where Thomas's things waited. My first stop. Inside, a desk sergeant looked up from his crossword puzzle. His eyes got narrow when I said my name. "Mitchell," he said, not a question. "Thomas's nephew." I nodded. He went into a back room and came back with a cardboard box. "Everything we collected from the scene," he said, pushing it across the counter. "What exactly happened?" I asked. The phone call 3 weeks back had been short on details, just that Thomas had died in what they called an accident on the mountain. The sergeant's face tightened. "It's all in the report." He tapped the folder on top of the box. "Fell during his night shift. Bad head wound. Probably died right away." The way he wouldn't meet my eyes told me there was more, but he wasn't sharing. I signed where he pointed and gathered up the box. It wasn't heavy, just a leather journal, a wallet with $43, a ring of keys marked Lodge, and his watch. The sum of a life. "Town's not used to outsiders," the sergeant said as I turned to leave. "Even family." I nodded, taking the warning for what it was. Outside, the afternoon had cooled down. People walked up and down the sidewalks, but nobody looked at me. Not directly. They'd glance, then look away. Quick darting eyes that checked me out without wanting to be caught doing it. I needed supplies before heading to the cabin, so I found the general store at the end of the block. A bell jingled overhead when I walked in. 4 people stood near the counter, all turning to stare. Their conversation stopped. "Help you?" The man behind the register had thick hands and a gray beard. "Just picking up some basics." I moved toward the grocery aisle. The whispers started before I was halfway there. "Mitchell's nephew. Just like him, here to stick his nose. Better hope he's smarter than his uncle was." I grabbed what I needed. Bread, eggs, coffee, a couple cans of soup. When I brought it to the counter, the man rang me up without a word. "I'm Ryan Mitchell," I said, pushing my cash across the counter. "Thomas was my uncle." The man counted my change with careful precision. The others had spread out to different corners of the store, suddenly interested in products they'd been ignoring. "Sam Guthrie," he finally said, bagging my things. "Sorry about your uncle." I waited for more, but that was it. "Any chance you knew him well?" I tried again. Sam shook his head. "Not really. Came in for supplies now and then. Kept to himself." He pushed my bag forward. "Cabin's up on Mill Creek Road. Last one before the forest starts proper." I took the hint and left, feeling the stairs on my back. The cabin wasn't hard to find. A dirt driveway led to a small house that needed a fresh coat of paint. Pine trees grew close on 3 sides, with branches that scraped the roof when the wind blew. Inside, it smelled musty and empty. One main room worked as kitchen and living area, with a bedroom and bathroom off to the side. I put my bags down and looked around. Thomas hadn't been much for decorating. A couch faced a small TV. The kitchen table had a stack of mail and an empty coffee mug. The cabinets had the basics: plates, cups, canned goods. It was what I found behind things that told the real story. An empty whiskey bottle behind the bread box. Another under the bathroom sink. 3 more emptied and hidden in the bedroom closet. I knew the drill. I'd done the same thing, hiding bottles from roommates, from girlfriends, from myself. 6 months clean, and seeing those bottles still made my throat tighten. On the kitchen table, beneath the pile of junk mail, I found an envelope addressed to me. Inside was a letter on Raven's Peak Mountain Lodge letterhead. In the event of Thomas Mitchell's death or inability to perform his duties, the position of night watchman is offered to his next of kin, Ryan Mitchell. They'd known I would come, expected it even. The letter listed the pay, decent enough, and basic duties. Patrol the lodge from midnight to 8 a.m., log any disturbances, maintain security protocols. At the bottom, a handwritten note. The job is yours if you want it. Call the number. George Campbell, manager. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. The cabin felt smaller now, the walls closer. Night was falling outside the windows. I unpacked, made a simple dinner, and tried to settle in. The journal from the sheriff's box sat on the table, but I wasn't ready to read it yet. Too raw, too real. Sleep came hard in the unfamiliar bed. I dozed off sometime after midnight, only to jerk awake at the sound of scratching at my window. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I lay still, listening. It could have been branches, but there was a pattern to it. 3 scratches, pause. 3 more, pause. I got up and moved to the window, part of me not wanting to look. The glass showed only my reflection against the darkness outside. I pressed my face closer, cupping my hands around my eyes. Nothing but trees and shadows. The scratching had stopped, but as I stood there, something about the forest changed. The dark spots between the trees looked deeper than before, and they seemed to move in a weird way. Almost like something was there, moving around, looking at me. I stepped back and drew the curtains closed. Sleep didn't come again that night. I sat at the kitchen table with Thomas's keys in front of me, turning the lodge key over and over in my fingers. The job offer felt too convenient, too ready, but I needed money. My savings wouldn't last long, and going back wasn't an option. Not yet. Not until I figured out what had really happened to Thomas. Come morning, I'd call the number, take the job, get a foothold in this strange, closed town. It was a fresh start, at least. And after 6 months of clawing my way toward sobriety, I knew how to recognize one when I saw it. Even if this one came with weird scratching sounds and shadows that moved around at night. I grabbed the phone from the security desk and punched in the number from the letter. 3 rings, then a rough voice answered. Campbell. This is Ryan Mitchell, about the night watchman position. Thomas's nephew. Good. Can you start tonight? No questions about my experience or qualifications. No mention of references or background checks. Just the assumption I'd take it. Yeah, I can start tonight. Be here at 8. I'll show you the rounds. He hung up without waiting for a response. I spent the day going through Thomas's things, looking for anything that might explain the scratching at my window or the town's strange reaction to me. His closet held work clothes, a few flannel shirts, boots worn down at the heels. The kitchen drawers had the usual junk, rubber bands, old receipts, takeout menus from places in town. In the bedroom nightstand, I found a small notebook filled with times and single-word notes. 10:15, howling. 2:30, scratching. 4:45, footprints. The last entry, from 3 days before his death, read, It's getting closer. I stuck the notebook in my jacket pocket and headed out. Raven's Peak Lodge sat halfway up the mountain, a big wooden building that blended with the forest around it. The main building was 3 stories high, with wings on both sides, stone chimneys stuck up from the roof. The parking lot had only 2 cars when I got there. The front doors opened into a lobby with a high ceiling and a huge stone fireplace. Trophy heads hung on the walls, deer, elk, and one bear with glass eyes that seemed to follow me. George Campbell stood behind the reception desk. He was tall and skinny, with deep lines around his mouth that made him look like he was always in a bad mood. Mitchell, he said, not offering his hand. Follow me. He led me through the lobby to a small office behind the reception desk. A bank of security monitors showed empty hallways and the dark parking lot. This is your base. You'll make rounds every hour on the hour. Check all doors and windows. Make sure everything's locked. Log anything you see in here. He tapped a thick binder on the desk. "What am I looking for exactly?" I asked. George's jaw tightened. "Nothing. You're not looking for anything. You're making sure the lodge is secure." He handed me a ring of keys and a flashlight, then led me through the building. The main floor had the lobby, restaurant, bar, and a few meeting rooms. The second and third floors held guest rooms, all empty now. "Off-season," George explained when I asked. "We'll have guests starting next month." The basement was last. Concrete floors, storage rooms, laundry facilities, and a boiler room. At the end of a long hallway stood a heavy metal door with 3 separate locks. "This stays locked," George said, not explaining why. "Always. No exceptions." "What's back there?" "Storage." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. "Just make your rounds every hour and log anything unusual." "What qualifies as unusual?" George's expression hardened. "Nothing is unusual here. No matter what you see or hear, it's just the mountain settling or animals in the woods. Don't investigate. Don't leave the marked paths." He pointed to a map on the wall showing the lodge grounds. Red lines marked paths between buildings and around the property. "Stay on these, especially at night." We returned to the security office where George checked his watch. "It's 8:15. Your shift runs until 8 tomorrow morning. Questions?" I had dozens, but his face told me none would be answered. "No." "Good. Phone's there if you need me. I live 10 minutes away." He headed for the door, then stopped. "Your uncle was a good man, reliable, until he wasn't." Before I could ask what he meant, George was gone. I settled into the chair, watching the security monitors. The lodge creaked around me as the night got cooler. At 9, I made my first round. Everything was locked and quiet. The hours crawled by. I checked the basement twice, paying special attention to the metal door. All 3 locks remained secure. Whatever was behind it would stay there. By midnight, I noticed how quiet it was outside. No crickets, no owls, no rustling leaves, even though I could see the branches moving in the breeze. The quiet felt deliberate, like the forest was holding its breath. At 1 a.m., I heard the first odd sound, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I checked the monitors. Nothing moved on any screen. My 2 a.m. round took me outside, following the marked path around the lodge's perimeter. The silence was even worse here. No night birds, no insects, not even the sound of small animals moving through the bushes. Just dead air and the crunch of gravel under my boots. I swept my flashlight across the tree line. Nothing moved, but the darkness between the trees seemed deeper than it should be, more solid somehow. Back inside, I logged what I'd seen, or rather, what I hadn't seen. 2:15 a.m., complete absence of wildlife sounds, unusual silence. At 3:17 a.m. it happened. A high-pitched scream cut through the night from somewhere in the forest. Not an animal sound, too human, too desperate. It rose in pitch until it broke, then stopped abruptly. I grabbed the phone and dialed George's number. He answered on the first ring like he'd been sitting with the phone in his hand. "What?" His voice was alert, not the voice of someone just woken up. "I heard a scream in the woods. Sounded like someone in trouble." "I told you, ignore it," George snapped. "That's just how things are here." "But if someone's hurt, no one's hurt. No one's out there. Stay inside. Stay on the paths. Do your job." He hung up. I sat back, my chest racing. The scream had been real. I knew it. But George's quick answer, his lack of surprise, he'd heard it before, expected it even. At 4 a.m. during my rounds, I heard footsteps on the roof, heavy, clear steps that crossed from one end to the other. I checked the security monitors. The roof camera showed nothing but empty shingles and night sky. By 5 a.m., I was getting super tired. I'd been up most of the night before, and the stress had worn me out. I made coffee in the small break room and went back to the monitors. That's when I saw them. Shadows moving at the tree line. Too big to be human. too purposeful to be tricks of the light. They moved between the trees, sometimes on 4 legs, sometimes getting up to stand on 2. The camera's infrared couldn't quite catch them. Just vague, moving shapes that disappeared when I tried to look right at them. I wrote down everything, every sound, every shadow, every moment of weird quiet. Dawn came slowly, the sky changing from black to deep blue to pale gray. As the first sunlight hit the trees, I heard a sound like a deep group sigh from the forest. Then, like someone flipped a switch, birds began to sing. Squirrels made noise. The normal morning sounds filled the air. George showed up at 7:55, looking exactly as he had the night before. No messy hair, no sleepy eyes. He looked at the logbook, his face getting tight as he read what I wrote. "You wrote too much," he said, closing the book. "Just note the times of your rounds and any maintenance issues, nothing else." "I heard a scream," I said. "Saw things moving in the woods." "No, you didn't." His voice was flat. "You heard the wind, saw shadows from clouds passing over the moon. That's all." "There weren't any clouds last night." George stared at me, his eyes hard. "This job isn't for everyone. Your uncle understood that, eventually. You need to decide if you can handle it." "What happened to him?" "Really?" "He fell. Hit his head. End of story." George picked up his keys. "Will you be back tonight?" I thought about the shadows, the scream, the footsteps on the roof, about Thomas's hidden bottles and cryptic notes, about the metal door in the basement with its 3 locks. "Yeah," I said. "I'll be back." George nodded once. 8 o'clock. Don't be late." I walked back to the cabin in the morning light, too tired to drive. The forest just looked like regular trees and bushes now. Nothing scary about it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from just beyond the tree line. Something that had screamed in the night. Something that had walked on the roof. Something that knew I was here. I pushed through the library's heavy oak doors, the hinges groaning like they hadn't been oiled in decades. The place was empty except for a gray-haired woman behind the front desk. She wore glasses and stamped books quickly as I walked in. "Help you?" she asked without looking up. "I'm researching local history," I said, "specifically around Raven's Peak Lodge." Her hand froze mid-stamp. She looked up at me, lips pressed into a thin line. "Town records are in the back room." She pointed to a door with flaking green paint. "Newspapers are on microfilm, history sections on the left wall." I thanked her and headed toward the back room. The space smelled of old paper and dust, with metal shelving units packed tight with cardboard boxes and bound volumes. A single microfilm reader sat on a desk in the corner, with a pale blue light coming from its screen. I started with the history books, pulling down anything that mentioned Blue Ridge or the surrounding mountains. Most were standard local histories: when the town was founded, who the first settlers were, how the logging industry shaped the area. Nothing about strange occurrences or things in the woods. The microfilm proved more useful. I loaded spools of local newspapers, starting with the most recent and working backward. At first, nothing jumped out. Town council meetings, school events, weather reports. Then I hit 1972. 3 dead in mountain incident, the headline read. The article was frustratingly vague. 3 maintenance workers at Raven's Peak Lodge were found deceased yesterday morning. Sheriff Robert Tanner cited multiple factors in the deaths and assured residents that the situation has been contained. The lodge will remain closed for 2 weeks during investigation. No names, no cause of death, no follow-up articles in the next issues. I kept scrolling backward. The pattern emerged slowly. Every few years, a brief mention of someone gone missing, a hiker who never returned to his campsite, a hunter who went too deep into the woods, a teenager who took a dare to spend the night on the mountain. Some were found, many weren't. The librarian showed up behind me, making me jump. "We're closing in 5 minutes," she said, her eyes flicking to the screen. Find what you needed? Not exactly. These articles about the disappearances, they're pretty light on details. She took off her glasses, cleaning them with the bottom of her cardigan. Small town papers report what the town needs to know. And what about what really happened? Her eyes narrowed. You're Thomas Mitchell's nephew. It wasn't a question. Yes, I'm working at the lodge now. Then you should be careful what you go looking for. She reached past me and switched off the microfilm reader. Some questions are better left unasked in Blue Ridge. I gathered my notes and headed out. The sun was setting and the mountains had dark purple shadows. My shift didn't start for another 4 hours. I needed a drink, not alcohol, I reminded myself, and maybe some food. The Timberline was the only bar in town. It had neon beer signs in the windows. Inside, the place was half full. Mostly men in work clothes drinking beers at small tables. Conversation stopped when I walked in, then started again more quietly. I took a seat at the bar and ordered a club soda with lime. The bartender raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. You're Mitchell's nephew, said a voice to my left. I turned to find a man in his 50s with rough skin and work-worn hands. He sipped a beer with 3 empty glasses pushed to the side. Word travels fast, I said. Small town. He extended his hand. David Wilson. I worked with your uncle a few times, logging jobs. I shook his hand. Ryan Mitchell. Heard you took his job at the lodge. I nodded, sipping my soda. 3 nights in. And? His eyes were sharp despite the empty glasses in front of him. And what? Seen anything yet? The question hung between us. I thought about the screams, the footsteps on the roof, the shadows at the tree line. Maybe, I said carefully. David nodded like I'd confirmed something. He glanced around, then slid onto the stool next to mine. Your uncle and I talk sometimes. When he'd come in here, David's voice dropped lower. He asked questions too, about the mountain, about the things people see up there. What kind of things? David took a long pull from his beer. Been here all my life. My daddy too, and his daddy before him. Some things you just grow up knowing. Like what? Like staying on the paths. Like not going into certain parts of the woods after dark. He leaned closer. Like what happens to folks who break the rules. The bartender came our way, wiping down the counter. David straightened up, falling silent until the man moved on. Your uncle knew what was out there, he whispered once we were alone again. We all do. Been here for generations. Some call it a beast. Others say it's something older than the mountains themselves. I suddenly felt spooked. And it wasn't from the bar's AC. David looked at me. I don't call it anything, don't talk about it at all most times. Bad luck. Then why are you talking to me? He drained his beer and signaled for another. Because you're here now. Because you took that job. And because your uncle was asking the same questions before he died. What happened to him, really? David accepted a fresh beer from the bartender, waiting until we were alone again. Official story is he fell. Hit his head. And the unofficial story. He went looking for answers. Found something else instead. David's fingers tapped nervously on his glass. Look, I shouldn't be saying this much. Town has ways of dealing with people who talk too much. Who should I talk to then? Someone must know what's really going on. David hesitated, glancing toward the door like he was considering making a run for it. Finally, he sighed. Ask the old man who lives by Blackwater Creek, he said. Harold knows more than anyone. Cabin's about 3 miles up the north road where the creek bends under the big oak. Harold who? Jenkins. Harold Jenkins. David stood abruptly. I've said too much already. Just be careful up there at night. Stay on the paths. Don't go investigating strange noises. He tossed some bills on the bar and headed for the door, hunching his shoulders like someone was about to hit him. I finished my soda and paid my tab. Outside, it was completely dark now. You could see stars between the clouds, and the half-moon barely lit up the empty street. My car was parked at the end of the block. As I walked to it, it got noticeably colder. The hair on my arms stood up. Something felt off. I stopped to listen. The town was dead quiet. No cars, nobody walking around. Just an owl hooting somewhere and leaves rustling in the wind. Then I saw it. A huge shadow ran across the road ahead way too fast for how big it was. It came and went in seconds, but I couldn't forget what I'd seen. Something big on 4 legs that didn't look like any normal animal. I grabbed my flashlight, turned it on, and pointed it all over the road. Nothing was there. No tracks, nothing moving in the bushes on either side. But the air smelled different now, like wet fur and pennies, an animal and blood together. I couldn't move, and my hand shook a little as I held the flashlight. After a whole minute of nothing, I made myself move, rushing to my car and locking the doors as soon as I got in. The engine started right away, my headlights lighting up the dark road. As I drove toward the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I'd seen crossing the road wasn't just passing through. It was watching, waiting. I had a gut feeling it had been watching me ever since I got to Blue Ridge. I pulled my car onto the narrow dirt track where Blackwater Creek Road turned from pavement to gravel. The trees crowded in from both sides, branches scraping against the windows. David's directions had been simple enough. Follow the north road until the big oak where the creek bent. But in these woods, every tree looked old and tall. The road got even narrower, making me slow down to a crawl. My headlights showed a wooden bridge crossing the creek with gray, worn-out planks. Past it was a small cabin with a metal roof that caught some of the afternoon light. I parked and turned off the engine. It got really quiet right away, except for the soft sound of the creek and a woodpecker tapping somewhere nearby. The cabin looked barely lived in. Smoke came from the stone chimney, and there was a stack of split wood against one wall. The porch drooped a little in the middle. On that porch sat a man in a wooden rocking chair, so still I hadn't noticed him at first. He watched me without moving, hands resting on his knees. I got out of the car and approached the bridge. The old boards creaked under my weight. "You're Thomas's boy," the man said before I'd even reached the other side. His voice carried clearly across the space between us, neither raised nor strained. I stopped halfway across. "I'm his nephew, Ryan Mitchell." The man nodded like this confirmed something he already knew. "Harold Jenkins." He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Come sit." I crossed the rest of the bridge and climbed the 3 steps to the porch. Up close, Harold looked older than I'd expected. His face had deep wrinkles and his hair was all white. But his eyes were bright as he looked me over. "How did you know who I was?" I asked, lowering myself into the chair. "You look like him, around the eyes." Harold kept rocking, the chair making a soft rhythm against the wooden boards. "And not many strangers come this way. David Wilson told me I should talk to you." Harold's mouth twitched. "David talks too much when he drinks, always has. He said you know things. About the mountain. I know many things. Which ones are you after?" I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "I've been working at the lodge for 3 nights now. I've heard screams in the forest, footsteps on the roof, seen shadows moving between the trees." Harold's rocking slowed but didn't stop. "You've been hearing it at night, haven't you?" His tone made my stomach drop. He already knew. "What is it?" I asked. Harold looked past me to the darkening forest. The sun was low in the sky and the clearing was getting dark. "The mountain has always had a keeper," he said. "Something old. Something that was here long before the first settlers cut down trees to build their homes. A beast. That's what some call it. Names don't matter much to things that old." I thought about the shadows I'd seen, the unnatural movement at the tree line. What does it want? Same as any living thing. Territory. Food. Harold's eyes came back to mine. The town made a pact generations ago. We stay on marked paths. Never hunt in certain areas. Leave offerings at stone markers deep in the woods. Offerings? Like sacrifices? Harold shook his head. Food mostly. Sometimes tools or clothes, things it finds useful. And in return? In return, it takes only what it needs. The implications of that hung in the air between us. I thought about the missing hikers, the dead maintenance workers, the strange silence in the forest at night. My uncle, I said. What happened to him? Harold's rocking stopped completely. Thomas broke the rules, got curious about what was behind that metal door. My breath caught. The door in the basement with the 3 locks? Harold nodded, his face grim. That door was part of the original pact, a boundary line. What's behind it? Harold's eyes widened slightly. A way in, or maybe a way out for it. The sun was getting lower. Harold looked up at the darkening sky and quickly stood up. You need to go, he said. It's not safe after dark. I stood too, not ready to leave. But I still don't understand. Understanding won't save you. Harold disappeared into the cabin, returning moments later with a small leather pouch. He pressed it into my hand, his fingers cold against mine. Keep this with you. Stay on the path. Never leave the lodge during your shift. The pouch was soft, worn by years of handling. It felt heavy for its size. What is it? Protection. Of a sort. Harold was already ushering me toward the steps. Go now, and don't come back here after sunset. I stumbled down the steps, the urgency in his voice pushing me forward. At the bridge, I turned back. My uncle's journal mentioned footprints, scratching, things getting closer. What was he talking about? Harold stood at the edge of his porch, half in shadow now. The beast tests boundaries, always has. But something's changed. It's getting bolder. Why? Because the pact is weakening. Has been for years. Harold's face was deadly serious. Your uncle wasn't the first to break the rules, just the most recent. I wanted to ask more, but the sun had nearly disappeared behind the mountains. The forest around us was darkening rapidly. Go, Harold said one last time, and remember, stay on the paths. I drove back too fast on the narrow road, looking in my rearview mirror more than at the road ahead. The trees seemed to crowd the road behind me. By the time I got back to regular pavement, I was gripping the steering wheel super tight. Back at the cabin, I locked the door and closed the curtains. I still had 3 hours before my shift at the lodge. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the leather pouch Harold had given me. Inside was a small bundle of dried herbs tied with twine. They smelled strong and weird. Under that was what looked like a tooth, yellow, curved, and way too big for any normal animal. It was as long as my thumb, with a jagged edge that shined in the light. I put the tooth on the table and looked at it. Whatever it came from would have had a mouth full of these, something that ate meat. My phone rang, making me jump. Emma's name popped up on the screen. Hey, I answered, trying to sound normal. Ryan, you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine. Just getting ready for work. How's it going? The job working out? I looked at the tooth on the table. It's interesting. Interesting how? Just different than I expected. I couldn't tell her about the screams, the shadows, the beast. She'd think I was hallucinating, that sobriety had cracked something in my brain. How are things with you? Same old. Listen, I was thinking of coming to visit next month. See this place you're settling into. No, I said too quickly. I mean, not yet. Let me get more established first. Silence on the line. Then, Ryan, are you sure you're okay? You don't sound like yourself. Just tired, new job, new schedule. I forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. Night shifts are messing with my sleep. If you say so. She didn't sound convinced. Call me if you need anything, okay? Anytime." "I will, promise." After we hung up, I put the tooth and herbs back in the pouch and slipped it into my pocket. I ate a quick dinner, not tasting the food, then headed to the lodge for my shift. George was waiting in the security office, flipping through the previous night's log. He looked up when I entered. "You're early," he said, checking his watch. "Couldn't sleep." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Something on your mind?" I thought about telling him I'd spoken with Harold, but something in his earlier warning made me hesitate. "Just getting used to the schedule." George nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Make your rounds on time tonight. We had some disturbances last night after you left." "What kind of disturbances?" "Nothing to worry about. Just keep to the paths and log anything unusual." He headed for the door, then paused. "And Mitchell? Whatever you hear tonight, stay inside." The door closed behind him before I could ask what he meant. I sat down in the chair, watching the security monitors showing empty hallways and darkened rooms. My hand kept going to the leather pouch in my pocket, fingers feeling the outline of the tooth through the soft material. At 10, I made my first round. The lodge was quiet, the empty guest rooms locked and dark. In the basement, I checked the metal door with its 3 locks, all locked up. By midnight, the usual silence had fallen outside. No crickets, no nightbirds, no rustling leaves, just dead air and the occasional creak of the lodge settling. At 12:17, it started, a low howl from somewhere in the forest, rising in pitch until it seemed to fill the entire night. It wasn't a wolf. Too deep, too sustained. It held for nearly 30 seconds before fading. I checked the monitors. Nothing moved on any screen. The howling came again at 1:05, closer this time. It sounded like it was coming from just beyond the tree line. I made my rounds at 1:30, staying inside as George had warned. Through the windows I could see nothing but darkness and the vague outlines of trees. At 2:22 during my rounds I heard scratching at the main entrance. 3 distinct scratches. A pause, then 3 more. The same pattern I'd heard at the cabin my first night. I walked to the door slowly, flashlight raised. The scratching stopped. Then came a soft thump, like something heavy leaning against the wood. I couldn't move, my hand tight around the leather pouch in my pocket. After a full minute of silence, I worked up the courage to look through the peephole. Nothing but darkness. I returned to the security office and logged what I'd heard. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. No more howls, no more scratching. Just the feeling that something was out there, watching and waiting. When George arrived at 7:55, I was already packed up to leave. "Anything to report?" he asked, scanning the logbook. "Howling, closer than before, and scratching at the main entrance around 2:30. George's face remained impassive, but I noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the desk. "Did you go outside?" "No, you said to stay in." He nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Good, that's good." I hesitated, then decided to take the risk. "I talked to Harold Jenkins yesterday." George's head snapped up, eyes suddenly alert. "What did he tell you?" "About the pact, the beast. What's behind the door?" "And you believe him?" George's voice was carefully neutral. "I believe something's out there, something that killed my uncle." George was silent for a long moment, studying my face. Finally, he sighed. "Harold knows things, yes, but he's not always reliable. He seemed pretty clear to me. Just be careful what you take as truth around here." George picked up the logbook. "Some stories get twisted over time." I nodded, not convinced, but unwilling to push further. "See you tonight." The morning air felt clean after the stale air of the lodge. I drove back to the cabin with the windows down to freshen up. The forest looked normal in daylight, just trees and bushes, nothing weird. But as I pulled up to the cabin, I spotted something on the front porch, a small, dark shape. I got out to check. It was a dead rabbit with a broken neck, not torn up or bloody, just broken cleanly. Someone had placed it right in front of my door. I looked around. The clearing was empty, the forest quiet except for normal morning sounds. I picked up the rabbit by its back legs and carried it to the edge of the woods. As I tossed it into the bushes, I felt like this was a message. Or maybe a warning. Or maybe an offering. I flipped through my uncle's journal. The cover was old and smooth from use. I found it hidden behind some old incident reports in the security office filing cabinet, not where it should have been with his other stuff. Someone had put it there on purpose. The first entries were pretty normal. Weather notes, maintenance issues, quick mentions of wildlife he saw during night rounds. March 3rd. Quiet night. Fixed loose railing on east staircase. Raccoon got into the dumpster again. March 7th. Heavy rain. Leak in lobby ceiling near fireplace. Left note for maintenance. But around mid-April, the writing changed. April 16th. Heard something in the basement tonight. Not pipes. Not settling. Like whispers. Checked 3 times. Nothing there. April 22nd. Footprints outside the east entrance. Too big for a person. Not shaped right for a bear. George says I'm seeing things. I turned the page, forgetting about my coffee getting cold next to me. The handwriting got messier as the entries went on, with neat lines turning into slanted writing that sometimes cut into the paper. May 3. They're watching me from the trees. I can see their eyes reflecting my flashlight. Not animals. They don't move right. May 10. Found scratches on the basement door. 3 sets. Always 3. George says it's nothing. He's lying. May 17. It knows when I'm alone. It waits until I'm alone. The final pages had broken thoughts, with some sentences stopping halfway, others pushed so hard into the paper they almost broke through. May 30. Can't sleep. It's scratching at my windows at home now. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. June 2nd. Harold knows. He's always known. Says I need to stay on the paths. Too late for that. The last entry was dated 3 days before his death. June 5th. It's not what they say it is. Not a beast. Something worse. It wears faces. It knows things. I closed the journal, my hands shaking a bit. The security office felt cramped now. The monitors showed empty hallways, vacant rooms, and the quiet forest beyond the lodge's walls. Everything looked normal. Nothing was. My watch showed 1:47 a.m., time for another round. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, putting the journal in my jacket pocket. The lodge made creaking sounds as I walked the main floor, the usual noises of an old building. Nothing weird in the lobby, nothing in the restaurant or meeting rooms. The basement was last, like always. I hated going down there, especially after reading the journal. The stairs made noise under my weight as it got colder with each step. The bare bulbs made yellow spots of light that didn't reach the corners. I was halfway down the hallway when I saw them. Muddy footprints coming from the utility entrance. They went straight to the metal door with its 3 locks. I followed slowly, keeping my flashlight on the prints. They weren't human. Too large, weirdly shaped, with what looked like claw marks at the edges. Not bear tracks either. Nothing I knew. The trail ended at the door. The locks were fine, but the metal had fresh scratches, 3 parallel lines deep enough to cut the steel. I touched them, feeling the rough edges. Something had tried to get in. Or out. My radio made a crackling noise, making me jump. "Mitchell, you there?" George's voice, tight with tension. I keyed the mic. "Yeah, in the basement." A pause. "Stay there." I waited, listening to the heating system running and my own breathing. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard the security door upstairs slam open and footsteps pounding down the stairs. George appeared at the end of the hallway, still buttoning his flannel shirt, hair sticking up on one side. He looked like he'd dressed in seconds. "What did you see?" he demanded, striding toward me. I pointed at the footprints. "These weren't here during my midnight round." George stared at the tracks, then at the scratched door. His face went slack for a moment before turning into something between anger and fear. "You need to forget what you saw," he said, pushing past me to a supply closet. He pulled out a mop and bucket. "What are you doing?" "Cleaning up." He filled the bucket at a utility sink, sloshing water onto his shoes in his haste. "Shouldn't we document this? Call someone?" "No." The word came out sharp as a slap. George began mopping the mud, erasing the prints with quick, aggressive strokes. "This isn't something we report." I pulled the journal from my pocket. "My uncle saw things too. Wrote about them." George's hands froze on the mop handle. "Where did you get that?" "Found it in the filing cabinet. Someone hid it." "Give it to me." He held out his hand, water dripping from his fingers onto the concrete floor. I stepped back, keeping the journal. "It's my uncle's. Belongs to me now." George's jaw worked, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "Your uncle couldn't let it go. And look what happened." "What did happen? Because I'm starting to think he didn't just fall." George resumed mopping, his movements jerky. "Some things are better left alone, Mitchell. This town has ways of dealing with problems. Has for generations. Harold Jenkins told me about the pact." The mop clattered to the floor. George's face drained of color so quickly I thought he might pass out. "Stay away from him," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "He's not right in the head. He seemed pretty clear to me. Told me about the beast, the offerings, the boundaries." George picked up the mop, his hands shaking slightly. "Harold Jenkins is dangerous. He knows things, yes, but he's not what you think." "What is he then?" "Just stay away from him." George finished cleaning the mud, then wrung out the mop with more force than necessary. "And stay on the paths. Always on the paths." He gathered his cleaning supplies and headed for the stairs, then paused, looking back at me. "You're a lot like your uncle. Curious, stubborn. He couldn't stop digging either. Is that why he died?" George's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something like pity there. "Finish your shift, Mitchell. Lock up when you leave. And for God's sake, stay inside." After he left, I stood alone in the basement corridor, staring at the now clean floor and the scratched door. The journal felt heavy in my pocket. I finished my rounds and returned to the security office. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. I logged the incident in careful, neutral language. Mud tracked in from utility entrance, cleaned by manager. At 4:17 a.m., I heard it. A child crying outside. The sound was faint at first, just on the edge of hearing. A soft, hiccuping sob that might have been the wind. But it came again, clearer this time. Unmistakable. I checked the monitors. The exterior cameras showed nothing but empty grounds and dark trees. The crying continued, rising and falling like real distress. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, hesitating at the door. George's warning came back to me. Stay inside. But it was a child. A lost, frightened child. I keyed my radio. "George, you there?" Static answered me. I tried again. Nothing. The crying grew louder, more desperate. I made my decision, unlocking the main entrance and stepping outside. The night air hit me like a wall, cold and damp. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the empty parking lot to the tree line beyond. There, a small figure at the edge of the woods, child-sized, standing perfectly still. "Hello?" I called, my voice sounding thin in the vast silence. "Are you okay?" The crying stopped. The figure didn't move. I took a step forward, then another. "It's all right. I'm here to help." The figure backed away, disappearing between the trees. "Wait!" I moved faster, following the small shape as it withdrew deeper into the forest. My flashlight caught glimpses, a pale arm, the back of a head, small feet moving between fallen logs. I pushed through branches, stumbling over roots. The lodge lights got farther away behind me. The child stayed just ahead, always visible but never quite reachable. "Please stop. I won't hurt you." The figure stopped in a small clearing, with their back to me. I felt so relieved as I walked up. "Hey there, are you lost? Let me help you get—" I stopped mid-sentence as my flashlight beam went across the ground. There was no path beneath my feet, just wild forest floor untouched by human traffic. I'd left the path. I felt sick with shock. Harold's warning, George's insistence. Stay on the paths. The crying stopped. Everything went quiet, making my ears feel stuffed. Not even insects made noise in the darkness. Slowly, the small figure turned. Before I could see its face, a low growl rumbled through the clearing. Not from the child shape, but from everywhere at once. From the trees, the ground, the air itself. It shook my chest and made my teeth rattle. I backed away, my flashlight jumping wildly across the trees. Shadows moved between the trunks, huge, liquid shapes that seemed to flow instead of walk. More growls joined the first, making a circle of sound around me. The child figure stood completely still now. My flashlight caught its face for just a moment. Blank, expressionless, with eyes that bounced the light back at me. I turned and ran, smashing through bushes, branches slapping my face. Behind me, the growling got louder, closer. I could hear heavy movement in the forest, the snap of branches breaking under heavy weight. I saw the lodge lights through the trees and pushed harder, my lungs burning. The building seemed so far away. Something brushed my back, not quite touching, but close enough to feel its heat. I didn't look back, couldn't look back. The edge of the forest was just ahead. 3 more strides and I burst from the tree line, stumbling across open ground toward the lodge entrance. I slammed into the door, fumbling with my keys, dropping them once before managing to jam the right one into the lock. As I pushed inside, I risked one quick look back. The forest wasn't moving. No sound, no motion, no sign of the child or whatever had chased me. But at the exact edge of the trees where forest met cleared ground stood Harold Jenkins. He raised one hand in what might have been a hello or a warning. Then he turned and walked into the darkness, vanishing between the trees as if he belonged there. I locked the door, my hands shaking so bad I had to try twice. Back in the security office, I collapsed into the chair, breathing hard and fast. The monitors showed nothing unusual, just empty grounds, dark forest, as if nothing had happened. I pulled out my uncle's journal and opened to the last page, reading his final words again. It's not what they say it is. Not a beast, something worse. It wears faces. It knows things. Outside, the forest waited, and somewhere deep inside it, something that could look like a child watched the lodge with patient, hungry eyes. I picked up the rifle from the floor where I'd dropped it, my hands still shaking. The tunnel was right there in the concrete wall where the metal door had been locked for decades. The air coming out of it smelled weird, damp and metallic like old pennies left in rain. My flashlight showed the first few yards of the rocky tunnel before it got too dark to see. Footprints were in the dirt floor, the same odd clawed prints I'd seen leading to the door earlier, but these went in, not out. I keyed my radio. "George, the basement door is open." Static answered me. "George, do you copy?" Nothing. The smart move would be to back away, lock up the lodge, and run. But the image of that child figure at the tree line kept flashing through my mind. Whatever had lured me into the woods last night was connected to this tunnel, and maybe to my uncle's death. I checked the rifle, loaded, safety off. My uncle had taught me to shoot when I was 12. I hadn't held a gun since getting sober. The weight of it felt both weird and normal in my hands. I stepped into the tunnel. The darkness got thicker around me. My flashlight seemed to dim the farther I went, barely cutting through the heavy air. The passage sloped downward, curving gently to the right. The walls changed from concrete to rough stone. Water dripped somewhere ahead, each splash bouncing back to me. The temperature dropped with every step. My breath fogged in front of my face. I'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when I heard it. A soft scraping sound like nails on stone. I froze, listening. It came again, farther ahead. Then silence. "Hello?" My voice sounded flat, absorbed by the stone around me. No answer, just the steady drip of water. I continued forward, rifle raised now. The tunnel got a bit wider, the ceiling higher until my light couldn't reach it. The air felt heavier here, making it harder to breathe. The memory of waking up in the woods that morning came back to me. Dirt under my fingernails, leaves in my hair. No idea how I'd gotten there. The last thing I remembered was running from whatever had chased me in the forest, seeing Harold at the tree line, then locking myself in the lodge. The next thing I knew, I was lying face down in the dirt half a mile from the lodge as dawn broke through the trees. George and the others had been waiting when I stumbled back. Their trucks parked in a half circle at the entrance. Their faces had been grim, accusing. "You left the path," George had said, his voice flat. "We can't protect you now." I'd tried to explain about the child, the crying, how I'd only been trying to help. They gave each other looks I couldn't understand. "There are no children at the lodge," George had said. "Never have been." I pushed the memory away, focusing on the tunnel ahead. The passage got wider, opening into what seemed like a bigger space. My light couldn't reach far enough to see walls or ceiling. I stepped forward and my boot hit something solid. I aimed my flashlight down. A stone marker stood at my feet, waist high and crudely carved. Symbols I didn't understand were all over its surface. Spirals, jagged lines, shapes that might have been eyes or mouths. The stone was dark with age and something that looked like dried blood. I moved my light around and saw more markers making a rough circle. In the middle of that circle stood a figure. "Harold?" My voice cracked on the name. He stood with his back to me, head bowed as if in prayer or concentration. He didn't turn at my voice. "Harold, what is this place?" "I tried to warn you," he said, his voice oddly flat. "The beast has chosen you as its new keeper." "What are you talking about?" I kept the rifle ready, something in his posture setting off alarms in my head. "The pact is broken. You broke it when you left the path." Harold's shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. "Now someone has to take my place." "Your place?" Harold turned slowly. His face was wrong, skin stretched too tight across the bones, eyes black from corner to corner. When he smiled, his mouth opened too wide. "I've been the keeper for so long," he said, his voice distorting, holding it back, feeding it just enough to keep it satisfied. "But I'm tired, Ryan. So tired." I raised the rifle. "What are you?" "I'm Harold Jenkins. I'm what's left of him." The thing wearing Harold's face took a step toward me. "I made the pact 100 years ago to save this town, bound myself to the beast to keep it contained." Another step. I backed up, keeping the distance between us. "Stay back." "You don't understand yet." Harold's face twisted in what might have been sadness. "But you will. The beast has marked you. It wants you now." "The beast? That thing in the woods?" Harold laughed, and it sounded creepy and sick. "What you saw in the woods was just a fragment, a piece it sends out to hunt. The real beast is much worse." My back hit stone. I'd reached the edge of the chamber. "The girl you saw wasn't real," Harold continued, still advancing. "Just bait. The beast wears faces to lure its prey. It knows what you fear, what you want, what you'll follow into the dark." I thought of the kid at the edge of the forest, its empty face and reflective eyes, the way it had stood frozen, watching me run. "My uncle," I said. "Did he come down here too?" "Thomas found this place, yes. He was curious, like you." Harold was close enough now that I could smell him, a musty, wrong smell, like wet earth and decay. "He wasn't suitable, too broken already. The beast needs someone stronger." I raised the rifle higher. Don't come any closer." Harold stopped, his black eyes locked on mine. "You can't stop what's happening, Ryan. The beast has picked you. It's already inside you. That's how you ended up in the woods this morning. It's testing you, seeing if you'll fit." "Fit for what?" "To be its new keeper." Harold spread his arms. "To take my place." I saw movement behind him, something moving in the darkness beyond my flashlight's reach, something big. "What happens if I refuse?" Harold's too wide smile returned. "Then the beast takes the town, all of it. The pact will be broken completely." My finger got tighter on the trigger. "And if I kill you?" "Then you've removed the last barrier holding it back." Harold took another step forward. "I am the lock on its cage, Ryan. Kill me, and you set it free." The movement behind him got bigger, a huge, dark shape rising from the cavern floor. I couldn't see what it was, just something big and wrong that hurt to look at. I had seconds to decide. Harold kept coming, his face changing into something that didn't look human anymore with each step. I fired. The shot was super loud in the small space. Harold stumbled backward, blood spreading across his chest. He looked down at the wound like he was a little surprised. "You fool," he gasped, dropping to his knees. I was the only thing keeping it contained. I moved up carefully, still pointing my rifle. Harold fell onto his back with blood forming a puddle under him. "The beast isn't what you think," he wheezed, grabbing my ankle with surprising strength. "It's been hiding as the girl you saw. Now there's nothing stopping it." His grip loosened. As I watched, his body got old fast. Skin wrinkled, hair turned white, flesh sank against bone. His black eyes turned milky white, then clouded over. The ground started shaking. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling. The shadow behind Harold's body grew bigger, filling the chamber. I ran. The tunnel seemed longer going back, bending in ways I didn't remember. The shaking got worse, the walls cracking around me. I tripped twice, catching myself on the rough stone. Behind me, something howled. A sound too big for the tunnel, too big for the mountain itself. It chased me upward, pushing at my back. I burst through the metal door into the basement corridor. The lights were flickering, the building making creaking noises around me. I sprinted for the stairs, taking them two at a time. The main floor was a mess. Furniture knocked over, windows cracked. I ran for the entrance, not stopping to grab anything from the security office. Outside, the night was full of noise and movement. Car engines revved, people shouted. Headlights cut through the darkness as vehicles pulled away from homes. The town was leaving. I ran to my car, threw the rifle in the back seat, and sped out of the parking lot. The road into town was packed with cars and trucks, all heading in the opposite direction, away from Blue Ridge. Main Street was crazy. People loaded vehicles with whatever they could carry. Children cried. A fire had started in one of the storefronts, with orange flames reaching into the night sky. I spotted David Wilson directing traffic at an intersection. I pulled over and jumped out. "What's happening?" I shouted over the noise. David looked really serious. "You killed him, didn't you?" It wasn't really a question. Harold was our protection. He made the original pact 100 years ago. Now it's free. I didn't know. "Doesn't matter now." David pointed down the road. "Get out while you can. It's coming." I got back in my car and followed the stream of vehicles heading out of town. We made it 3 miles before hitting a roadblock. A massive tree had fallen across the highway, blocking both lanes. I turned around, trying another route. Same story. A washout had taken out the bridge over Blackwater Creek. The storm that blew in was flooding low areas, cutting off escape routes. After the third blocked road, I gave up and headed back to my uncle's cabin. The town was half empty now. Those who couldn't get out were either locking themselves in their homes or gathering at the church, whose lights shone in the darkness. I pulled up to the cabin and sat in the car, engine idling. The rifle lay on the back seat, useless now. I'd killed Harold thinking I was protecting myself. Instead, I'd broken the last seal, holding back whatever lived under the mountain. My phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. "Ryan, I've been trying to reach you for hours." Her voice was tight with worry. "I'm okay," I lied. "Just been busy." "You don't sound okay. What's going on?" I watched lightning flash over the mountains. The storm was getting worse. "Nothing. Everything's fine." "Ryan, please, talk to me. I'm worried about you." I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the steering wheel. "I think I made a mistake coming here, Em." "Then come home. Just get in your car and drive. I'll meet you halfway." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because I killed a man tonight. Because I set something free that should have stayed locked away. Because every road out of town is blocked. I just need to figure some things out first," I said instead. "Ryan, you're scaring me. This doesn't sound like you." "I'm fine, really." I forced a steadiness into my voice I didn't feel. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" "Promise?" "Promise." I ended the call and got out of the car. The wind had picked up, bending the trees at the edge of the clearing. I unlocked the cabin door and stepped inside, locking it behind me. The cabin felt different now, smaller, more vulnerable. I checked all the windows, drawing the curtains tight. I brought in the rifle and loaded a fresh round into the chamber. From my window, I could see movement in the forest, trees swaying against the wind as if pushed aside by something large moving between them. Even though it was summer, the air inside the cabin turned so cold I could see my breath. I sat at the kitchen table, rifle across my lap, and waited for whatever was coming. I grabbed the rifle from the floor where I'd dropped it, my hands still shaking. The tunnel was in front of me, a dark opening in the concrete wall where the metal door had been locked for decades. The air coming from it smelled wrong, damp and metallic like old pennies left in rain. My flashlight showed the first few yards of rocky passage before the darkness took over. Footprints marked the dirt floor, the same odd clawed prints I'd seen leading to the door earlier. But these went in, not out. I keyed my radio. "George, the basement door is open." Static answered me. "George, do you copy?" Nothing. The smart move would be to back away, lock up the lodge, and run. But the image of that child figure at the tree line kept flashing through my mind. Whatever had lured me into the woods last night was connected to this tunnel. And maybe to my uncle's death. I checked the rifle, loaded, safety off. My uncle had taught me to shoot when I was 12. I hadn't held a gun since getting sober, the weight of it both odd and strange in my hands. I stepped into the tunnel. The darkness surrounded me completely. My flashlight seemed to dim the farther I went, barely cutting through the thick air. The passage sloped downward, curving gently to the right. The walls changed from poured concrete to rough stone, as if the builders had started with modern materials but given up as they dug deeper. Water dripped somewhere ahead, each splash bouncing back to me. The temperature dropped with every step. My breath fogged in front of my face. I'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when I heard it, a soft scraping sound like nails on stone. I froze, listening. It came again, farther ahead, then silence. "Hello?" My voice sounded flat, absorbed by the stone around me. No answer, just the steady drip of water. I continued forward, rifle raised now. The tunnel got a bit wider, the ceiling going up so high my light couldn't reach it. The air felt heavier here, making it harder to breathe. I remembered waking up in the woods that morning. Dirt under my fingernails, leaves in my hair. No idea how I'd gotten there. The last thing I remembered was running from whatever had chased me in the forest, seeing Harold at the tree line, then locking myself in the lodge. The next thing I knew, I was lying face down in the dirt 1/2 mile from the lodge as the sun came up. George and the others had been waiting when I stumbled back, their trucks parked in a half circle at the entrance. Their faces had been grim, accusing. "You left the path," George had said, his voice flat. "We can't protect you now." I'd tried to explain about the child, the crying, how I'd only been trying to help. They'd exchanged looks I couldn't read. "There are no children at the lodge," George had said. "Never have been." I pushed the memory away, focusing on the tunnel ahead. The passage got wider, opening into what felt like a bigger space. My light couldn't reach far enough to see walls or ceiling. I stepped forward, and my boot hit something solid. I pointed my flashlight down. A stone marker stood at my feet, waist-high and crudely cut. Weird symbols covered its surface. Spirals, jagged lines, shapes that looked like eyes or mouths. The stone was darkened over time and had something that looked like dried blood. I moved my light around and saw more markers making a rough circle. In the middle of that circle stood a figure. Harold? My voice cracked on the name. He stood with his back to me, head bowed as if in prayer or concentration. He didn't turn at my voice. Harold, what is this place? I tried to warn you, he said, his voice oddly flat. The beast has chosen you as its new keeper. What are you talking about? I kept the rifle ready, something in his posture setting off alarms in my head. The pact is broken. You broke it when you left the path. Harold's shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. Now someone has to take my place. Your place? Harold turned slowly. His face looked off. Skin pulled too tight across the bones. Eyes black from corner to corner. When he smiled, his mouth opened way too wide. I've been the keeper for so long, he said, his voice distorting, holding it back, feeding it just enough to keep it satisfied, but I'm tired, Ryan. So tired. I raised the rifle. What are you? I'm Harold Jenkins. I'm what's left of him. The thing wearing Harold's face took a step toward me. I made the pact 100 years ago to save this town. Bound myself to the beast to keep it contained. Another step. I backed up, keeping the distance between us. Stay back. You don't understand yet. Harold's face twisted in what might have been sadness. But you will. The beast has marked you. It wants you now. The beast, that thing in the woods? Harold laughed, making a gross, wet sound that bounced around the room. What you saw in the woods was just a fragment, a piece it sends out to hunt. The real beast is much worse. My back hit stone. I'd reached the edge of the chamber. The girl you saw wasn't real, Harold continued, still advancing. Just bait. The beast wears faces to lure its prey. It knows what you fear, what you want, what you'll follow into the dark. I thought of the child figure at the tree line, its blank face and mirror eyes, the way it had stood so still, watching me run. My uncle, I said. Did he come down here too? Thomas found this place, yes. He was curious, like you. Harold was close enough now that I could smell him. A musty, wrong smell, like wet earth and decay. He wasn't suitable. Too broken already. The beast needs someone stronger. I raised the rifle higher. Don't come any closer. Harold stopped, looking right at me. You can't stop what's happening, Ryan. The beast has chosen you. It's already inside you. That's how you ended up in the woods this morning. It's testing you, seeing if you'll fit. Fit for what? To be its new keeper. Harold spread his arms. To take my place. I saw movement behind him, something moving in the darkness beyond my flashlight's reach. Something large. What happens if I refuse? Harold's too wide smile returned. Then the beast takes the town. All of it. The pact will be broken completely. My finger tightened on the trigger. And if I kill you? Then you've removed the last barrier holding it back. Harold took another step forward. I am the lock on its cage, Ryan. Kill me, and you set it free. The movement behind him got bigger, a huge shadow rising from the cave floor. I couldn't really see what it was, just something big and wrong that hurt my eyes to look at. I only had a few seconds to decide. Harold kept coming toward me, his face looking less human with every step. I fired. The shot was crazy loud in the cave. Harold stumbled backward, blood spreading across his shirt. He looked down at the wound, seeming a little surprised. You fool, he gasped, dropping to his knees. I was the only thing keeping it contained. I walked up slowly, rifle still raised. Harold fell onto his back, with blood pooling beneath him. "The beast isn't what you think," he wheezed, grabbing my ankle with surprising strength. "It's been hiding as the girl you saw. Now there's nothing stopping it." His grip loosened. I watched his body get old, super fast. His skin got wrinkly, hair turned white, and his face sunk in. His black eyes turned milky white, then went completely cloudy. The ground began to shake. Dust and small stones rained from the ceiling. The shadow behind Harold's body grew, taking up the whole chamber. I ran. The tunnel felt longer going back, and it bent in ways I didn't remember. The shaking got worse, with walls cracking around me. I fell twice, catching myself on the stone walls. Behind me, something howled. A sound too big for the tunnel, too big for the mountain itself. It chased me upward, pushing at my back like a real thing. I burst through the metal door into the basement corridor. The lights were flickering and the building made creaking noises around me. I sprinted for the stairs, taking them two at a time. The main floor was a mess. Furniture flipped over. Windows cracked. I ran for the entrance, not stopping to grab anything from the security office. Outside, there was noise and movement everywhere. Car engines roared. People yelled. Headlights shined through the dark as vehicles drove away from homes. The town was evacuating. I ran to my car, threw the rifle in the back seat, and sped out of the parking lot. The road into town was packed with cars and trucks, all going the opposite way, away from Blue Ridge. Main Street was a mess. People loaded vehicles with whatever they could carry. Children cried. A fire had started in one of the storefronts, with orange flames burning into the night sky. I saw David Wilson directing traffic at an intersection. I pulled over and jumped out. "What's happening?" I shouted over the noise. David's face was grim. "You killed him, didn't you?" It wasn't really a question. Harold was our protection. He made the original pact 100 years ago. Now it's free. I didn't know. Doesn't matter now. David pointed down the road. "Get out while you can. It's coming." I got back in my car and followed the stream of vehicles heading out of town. We made it 3 miles before hitting a roadblock. A massive tree had fallen across the highway, blocking both lanes. I turned around, trying another route. Same story. A washout had taken out the bridge over Blackwater Creek. The sudden storm that had blown in was flooding low areas, cutting off escape routes. After the 3rd blocked road, I gave up and headed back to my uncle's cabin. The town was half empty now, those who couldn't get out barricading themselves in their homes or gathering at the church, whose lights lit up the darkness. I pulled up to the cabin and sat in the car, engine idling. The rifle lay on the back seat, useless now. I'd killed Harold thinking I was protecting myself. Instead, I'd broken the last seal holding back whatever lived under the mountain. My phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. "Ryan, I've been trying to reach you for hours." Her voice was tight with worry. "I'm okay," I lied. "Just been busy." "You don't sound okay. What's going on?" I watched lightning flash over the mountains. The storm was getting worse. "Nothing. Everything's fine." "Ryan, please. Talk to me. I'm worried about you." I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the steering wheel. "I think I made a mistake coming here, Em." "Then come home. Just get in your car and drive. I'll meet you halfway." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because I killed a man tonight. Because I set something free that should have stayed locked away. Because every road out of town is blocked. I just need to figure some things out first," I said instead. "Ryan, you're scaring me. This doesn't sound like you. I'm fine. Really." I forced a steadiness into my voice I didn't feel. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Promise?" "Promise." I ended the call and got out of the car. The wind had picked up, bending the trees at the edge of the clearing. I unlocked the cabin door and stepped inside, locking it behind me. The cabin seemed tiny now, and I felt exposed. I checked all the windows, drawing the curtains tight. I brought in the rifle and loaded a fresh round into the chamber. From my window, I saw the trees moving in the forest, not just from the wind, but like something big was pushing through them. It was summer, but the air was freezing cold. I could see my breath inside the cabin. I sat at the kitchen table, rifle across my lap, and waited for whatever was coming. The wind got stronger outside, shaking the windows. I checked my watch, just past midnight. The storm came in quick, way too fast and strong. I tried the radio, static. The TV, nothing but snow. My phone had one bar that kept coming and going. Through the window, I saw the last few cars in town driving to the church. Their lights showed the empty streets for a second before going dark again. People who couldn't get out were sticking together, maybe for safety, or maybe nobody wanted to die alone. I stayed put. Whatever was out there had been watching me since I arrived. It knew where I was. Running wouldn't help. A crash from outside made me run to the window. A pine tree had fallen across the road, snapped clean through. Not from lightning. Something had pushed it over. The trees at the edge of the forest moved the wrong way, like something big was pushing through them. I moved away from the window, gripping the rifle tighter. The cabin felt really thin right now, like it couldn't keep out what was outside. My breath came out foggy. The temperature dropped at least 20 degrees in the last hour. I could see frost forming on the inside of the windows. And it was July. I needed to think, to figure out what I was dealing with. Harold told me the beast wasn't what I thought. It had been hiding as the girl I saw in the woods. It wore faces. It knew what I wanted. My uncle must have learned something. He'd been here longer, had time to look around. I'd searched the cabin when I first got here, but only found hidden bottles. Thomas was careful, though. If he found something important, he wouldn't leave it out. I ran my hand along the bottom of the kitchen table, checking for taped stuff or notes. Nothing. I checked behind the drawers, under the mattress, behind the bathroom mirror. Still nothing. The floorboards made noise as I walked to the bedroom. I stopped to listen. One board near the bed sounded different, hollow. I knelt down and pushed on it. The board moved a little. I got my fingers in the edge and pulled. The board came up easy, showing a small space underneath. A manila envelope was in the dust, sealed with tape. I grabbed it and went back to the kitchen table, keeping the rifle nearby. Inside the envelope was a bunch of papers, notes in my uncle's handwriting, newspaper clippings, and rough drawings. I spread them out on the table, using my flashlight to see better. The top sheet was dated 3 weeks before Thomas died. It's not a beast, not in the way we understand. It exists between places, our world and somewhere else. The door in the basement is an anchor point, a way for it to reach through. Harold knows more than he's saying. He's connected to it somehow, bound to it. The next page had a drawing of the stone markers I'd seen in the underground chamber, with notes about where they were and the symbols carved into them. The symbols form a binding circle. Old magic, the kind that requires blood to work. Harold's blood or someone else's. I went through more pages. Thomas had been working hard in his final weeks, figuring out the history of Blue Ridge and the thing that lived under the mountain. 1923. First documented pact with the beast. 7 people disappeared that year. Town records show Harold Jenkins arrived the same year. Coincidence? 1972. 3 maintenance workers found dead at the lodge. All 3 had been checking out noises in the basement. All 3 had broken the rules about staying on paths. 1998. Lodge closed for 6 months after structural damage. Reopened with new basement door and 3 locks. George Campbell became manager the same year. The next page made my stomach drop. It feeds on fear, on desperation, on the kind of emptiness that drives people to places like Blue Ridge in the first place. People like me, people with nowhere else to go. I thought about why I came here. 6 months sober, running from a life I'd wrecked, hoping to start over. The same desperation my uncle had felt. The final page was dated just 2 days before Thomas died. I know how to end this. The beast is tied to the door, to the stone markers, to Harold. Break one link in the chain and the whole thing falls apart. I'm going down there tonight. If I don't come back, burn everything. The cabin, the lodge, all of it. Fire is the only thing it fears. I put the papers down. I was shaking. Thomas had gone down to the chamber just like I had. But unlike me, he hadn't killed Harold. Something else had happened. A sound from outside brought me back. A soft thump on the porch steps. Then another. Someone walking, taking their time. I grabbed the rifle and moved to the door, staying to the side of the window. The footsteps stopped at the door. Silence. Then 3 soft scratches on the wood. I held my breath, waiting. 3 more scratches. Then a voice. "Ryan, are you in there?" Emma's voice. My sister's voice. But that was impossible. Emma was states away. I'd just spoken to her on the phone. "Ryan, please. I drove all night to get here. Let me in." I moved to the peephole and looked out. Emma stood on the porch, soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her face. She looked exactly like my sister. The same worried expression she always wore when dealing with me, the same way of hugging herself against the cold. "I was so worried after our call," she said, looking directly at the peephole as if she could see me. "You didn't sound right. I had to come." I backed away from the door. This wasn't possible. Even if Emma had left immediately after our call, she couldn't have made it here this fast. And how would she have gotten through the blocked roads? "Let me in, Ryan." Not Emma called, her voice changing subtly. "I can help you." The scratching returned, harder now. 3 scratches. Pause. 3 more. "Ryan, please, it's cold out here." I backed further into the cabin, mind racing. The beast wears faces. It knows what you fear, what you want, what you'll follow into the dark. The scratching became pounding, the whole door shaking in its frame. The windows rattled. Something heavy slammed against the side of the cabin, making the walls creak. "Let me in, Ryan." The voice wasn't Emma's anymore. It was deeper, distorted, like several voices speaking at once. I needed a plan. The beast wanted in. It wanted me. Harold had said it had chosen me as its new keeper. My uncle's final note kept playing over and over in my head. Fire's the only thing it fears. I looked around the cabin. There was a gas can in the corner by the back door, for the generator, I assumed. And under the sink, I found what I was looking for. A bottle of lighter fluid for the grill. The pounding at the door grew more intense. Wood splintered around the hinges. It wouldn't hold much longer. I worked quickly, pouring gas along the walls, over the furniture, across the floor. The fumes made my eyes water, but I kept going until the can was empty. Then I added the lighter fluid, making sure to create a path from the back door to the front. As I worked, I kept my phone in my pocket. When I finished, I took it out and typed a quick email to Emma, my real sister, not the thing outside pretending to be her. I explained everything, the beast, the pact, what I'd learned from Harold and my uncle's notes. I told her I loved her, and that I was sorry for all the worry I'd caused her over the years. I hit send just as the front door gave way with a crash of splintering wood. The thing that stepped through the doorway wore Emma's face, but the resemblance ended there. Its body was wrong, too tall, too thin, joints bending in impossible ways. Its skin stretched and moved as if something underneath was trying to get out. "Ryan," it said, Emma's voice coming from a mouth that smiled too widely. "I've been waiting for you." I backed toward the kitchen, keeping the table between us. "What do you want from me?" "The same thing I wanted from Harold. The same thing I've wanted for 100 years." It took another step inside, its movements jerky and unnatural. A keeper. A vessel. Someone to hold me so I don't have to go back to the dark. And if I refuse, then I take the town, all of it. Every soul that couldn't escape. Its smile widened further, splitting Emma's face in a way that made my stomach turn. Starting with you. It lunged forward with impossible speed, clearing the table in a single bound. I stumbled back, digging in my pocket for the matches I'd grabbed from the drawer. Its hand, no longer Emma's hand, but something with too many joints and long bent fingers, grabbed my shirt, pulling me close. Its face changed, features melting and reshaping into something that looked like my uncle. Thomas wasn't strong enough, it said in my uncle's voice. But you are. You can end this, Ryan, just like he tried to. I struck the match and dropped it. The gas ignited with a whoosh, flames racing along the path I'd created. The thing wearing my uncle's face screamed, a sound no human throat could make, and released me. I scrambled toward the back door as fire climbed the walls and licked across the ceiling. Heat pressed against my back as I reached for the door handle. The beast howled behind me, its body changing and twisting as flames engulfed it. The cabin groaned as support beams began to give way. I had one chance, one moment to decide. I could run, escape through the back door and leave the beast trapped in the burning cabin. Or I could stay, make sure it couldn't escape, even if it meant going down with it. Thomas had tried to end this. Harold had contained it for decades. Now it was my turn. I turned back toward the beast. It writhed in the flames, its body changing rapidly between faces I recognized. Emma, Thomas, Harold, the child from the woods, even my own face, twisted in pain and rage. It ends with me, I said, though I wasn't sure if I was speaking to the beast or to myself. The roof started to cave in, burning wood falling down around us. The beast screamed with rage so loud it shook the mountains, drowning out even the roaring fire. Smoke got in my lungs. The heat burned my skin. I didn't move as the cabin burned around us. I watched the beast's stolen faces melt off, showing something underneath I couldn't make sense of. Something really old, hungry, and scared. Before the smoke made me blind, I saw its real eyes, too many to count, shiny and black, with our fire reflected in them as it burned us both up. I signed the contract in early June at a cramped Forest Service office in Ketchikan that smelled like wet nylon and old coffee. The woman who processed my paperwork didn't make eye contact, just slid the forms across the desk, pointed at the signature lines, and told me orientation started the next morning at 7. That was it. The job was seasonal, natural resources technician, which sounded official, but mostly meant driving boats to remote sites, checking equipment, and filling out condition reports. I didn't care what they called it. I needed work that came with housing and kept me out of Seattle, and Alaska was about as far as I could get without leaving the country. I took every patrol they offered. Didn't matter if it was a last-minute fuel run or a weekend survey nobody else wanted. Christina Lewis, my supervisor, noticed that pretty fast. She started assigning me the trips that required early departures or rough water crossings or long stretches without cell service, the kind of work that made people complain or call in sick. I never complained, just showed up. Ketchikan's small. You see the same faces at the grocery store, the laundromat, the harbor. People start recognizing you. They ask where you're from, what brought you up here, if you've got family nearby. Standard small-town stuff. I hated it. So I stayed in the field as much as possible, took the assignments that put me on islands with populations under 50, volunteered for the trips that involved camping near trail cameras or testing stream gauges in places you couldn't reach by road. Christina was happy to oblige. I think she figured I was either running from something or too socially broken to function in town. She wasn't totally wrong. The thing about seasonal work is you're always expendable. They hire you for a fixed contract. usually May through September, and if you mess up or make waves, they just don't renew you. No severance, no appeals process. You're gone. I knew that going in. So I made myself useful, dependable. The guy who showed up 15 minutes early and triple-checked his gear. I carried extra fuel canisters even when the trip plan didn't call for them. I logged mileage down to the 10th of a nautical mile. I filled out the condition report forms in the exact format Christina wanted, with printed labels and timestamps and notes in the margins about weather and visibility. It wasn't hard, just tedious. But tedious worked for me. I didn't want to think too much. Didn't want downtime to sit around and process things. I wanted checklists and coordinates and machinery that either worked or didn't. Christina treated me like I was disposable anyway. She'd call me at 6 in the morning and tell me a transport got moved up and I needed to be at the dock in 40 minutes. Or she'd reassign me mid-trip because another crew couldn't make their schedule. Once she sent me to check a weather station that had already been serviced the week before. I mentioned it, politely, and she just said to verify the previous crew's work and file a supplemental report. I did it. Didn't argue. Other people avoided her assignments. I heard them trade shifts or suddenly remember doctor's appointments when she started talking about certain sites. There was one cabin near Salmon Bay that had a reputation for bad foundations and mice in the walls. Nobody wanted to spend a night there. Christina asked me 3 times that summer. I went every time. I figured she was testing me, seeing how much I'd tolerate before I pushed back. I never gave her a reason to cut me loose. Aurora George started showing up on my assignments in July. She was a wildlife technician, older, maybe late 50s, with steel gray hair she kept in a braid and the kind of hands that looked like they'd been working outdoors for decades. She didn't talk much at first, just nodded when Christina introduced us and started loading her gear into the skiff. I thought she was there to babysit me, make sure the rookie didn't screw up or get lost or do something that'd create paperwork. But she never acted like that. She just worked. She'd check my knots without commenting on them. If they were wrong, she'd redo them. If they were fine, she'd move on. Same with the equipment. She'd go through the supply list, compare it against what I'd packed, and quietly add the things I'd missed. A backup VHF battery, extra trash bags, a fire starter that actually worked in wet conditions. After a couple trips, I started packing better. She noticed. Didn't say anything, but I could tell. She kept me from making mistakes I didn't even know were mistakes, like the time I almost tied off to a log boom that looked stable but wasn't anchored properly, or when I started hiking a ridge trail in running shoes instead of boots, and she just handed me a pair of gaiters and said the brush gets thick. It did. I appreciated it. Didn't know how to say that without sounding like I needed a mentor, so I just kept my mouth shut and paid attention. By late September, we'd been paired together maybe a dozen times. It felt routine. She'd meet me at the harbor, we'd load the skiff, and Jimmy Romero, the guy who ran most of the transport routes, would take us wherever Christina had marked on the map. The morning Christina assigned us to Ella Bay, I was at the office early. She was on the phone when I walked in, talking to someone about a delayed permit. She waved me toward a chair and kept talking for another 5 minutes. When she hung up, she slid a printout across the desk. Grid coordinates, a supply checklist, and a 2-line description. Inspect bear cache at Prince of Wales cabin. Replace handheld radio battery. Aurora's meeting you at the dock at 0900, she said. Jimmy'll have the skiff ready. You'll be there 1 night, maybe 2, depending on weather. I scanned the printout. Ella Bay was on the northwest side of Prince of Wales Island, which meant a long ride and no easy bailout if conditions got rough. The cabin wasn't near any towns, wasn't near much of anything. Forecast good? I asked. Christina shrugged. Good enough. You've handled worse. That wasn't really an answer, but I didn't push it. I folded the printout and stood up. Anything else? I said. Don't forget the camera for the cache inspection, and make sure the radio replacement gets logged with a timestamp. got it." She was already looking at her computer screen. I left. I met Aurora at the dock just before 9. She had her pack already loaded, her rain shell tied around her waist, and a thermos of coffee tucked into a side pocket. She looked at the printout when I showed it to her and nodded once. "You been to Ella before?" she asked. "No." "It's quiet. Not much out there." That was fine with me. I said so. She almost smiled. Jimmy showed up a few minutes later and we loaded the rest of the gear. I had the replacement battery and a waterproof case, the camera, extra fuel, and the usual overnight supplies. Aurora had her own pack, plus a rifle case, which wasn't unusual. Bears were active this time of year. I knew the trip was isolated. Christina didn't send people to places that were convenient, and I knew it wasn't really optional. She'd framed it as an assignment, not a request, and I wasn't in a position to say no. I didn't mind. Isolation was kind of the point. We climbed into the skiff and Jimmy started the engine. The water was calm enough. Gray sky, light chop, visibility maybe 3 miles. Standard September conditions. Aurora sat across from me and adjusted the straps on her pack. She didn't look concerned. I took that as a good sign. I didn't ask questions, just settled in for the ride and watched the harbor drop away behind us. Jimmy cut the engine about 20 feet from the dock and let the skiff drift in. He had the timing down. Didn't say much during the ride, just checked his watch twice and adjusted course when we passed a rocky point I didn't recognize. The water stayed calm the whole way. Took maybe 40 minutes. Aurora stood first and grabbed the dock post when we bumped up against it. I handed her pack up, then mine, then the rifle case. Jimmy tied off, but didn't kill the engine completely, just throttled down. "Pickup's Friday," he said. "Morning tide. Be here at 07:30. Aurora nodded. "Weather permitting." "Weather's fine." Jimmy checked his watch again. "Got another run after this." That was it. He untied before I'd even climbed out of the skiff, pushed off with one boot against the piling, and swung back toward open water. Engine noise built up fast. I watched him go for a few seconds. He didn't look back. "He's always like that," Aurora said. She had her pack on already. "Tide doesn't wait." I figured that was true. Didn't bother me much. I got my own pack settled and picked up the rifle case. Aurora shook her head and took it from me without asking. Fine by me. The dock wasn't in great shape. Some of the boards had gaps, and the whole thing leaned a little to the left. Didn't feel unsafe exactly, just old. We walked up toward the shore, and I got my first real look at the place. Ella Bay wasn't much. The beach was narrow, mostly rocks and driftwood piled up in uneven lines. Trees started about 30 feet back from the high tide mark, spruce and hemlock, dense enough that I couldn't see far into them. The cabin sat just inside the tree line on a small rise. One room from the look of it, dark wood siding, pitched roof with moss growing on the north side, and a narrow porch across the front. There was a window on either side of the door and one more on the side I could see. No lights on inside. We crossed the beach. My boots crunched on the rocks, and I had to step over a couple logs that had been there long enough to sink partway into the gravel. The air smelled like salt and wet wood, and something else I couldn't place. Rot, maybe, or just old seaweed. Aurora walked ahead of me up a path that was barely a path, just a line where the ground cover looked a little more beaten down. She didn't slow down or check behind her. I kept up fine. The cabin had 2 steps leading up to the porch. The wood was gray and weathered, but solid when I tested it. Aurora pulled a key from her jacket pocket. Christina must have given it to her before we left, and unlocked the door. It swung inward with a creak that sounded exactly like you'd expect. Inside was dim. Took a second for my eyes to adjust. One room, yeah. Maybe 15 by 20 feet. A wood stove in the corner with a dented kettle on top. A table with 2 chairs pushed up against the opposite wall. A narrow cot on each side, both with thin mattresses and wool blankets folded at the foot. Shelves above the table held canned goods, a few boxes of pasta, a jar of instant coffee. There was a sink with a hand pump next to the stove and a metal lockbox bolted to the wall near the door. The whole place smelled like old smoke and damp fabric and something faintly chemical. Probably mouse poison. Aurora set the rifle case down near one of the cots and shrugged off her pack. "Not bad," she said. "I've stayed worse." I believed her. I'd stayed worse too, though not by much. I dropped my pack by the other cot and looked around more carefully. The floorboards were uneven but clean. Someone had swept recently. There were hooks by the door for coats and a small mirror nailed to the wall that had a crack running through it. The windows had curtains made from old bedsheets, both pulled back and tied with what looked like paracord. That's when I saw the list. It was taped to the wall above the table. Just a piece of printer paper, but someone had written on it with a thick black marker. The letters were big and uneven, like whoever wrote it had been in a hurry or didn't care how it looked. The tape was yellowed at the edges. I stepped closer. The first line said, "Cabin rules." Then below that, "Keep porch light off after dark. Don't answer voices from the trees. Never follow whistling. Boots stay inside. Tracks invite visitors. If you hear knocking, wait until morning." I read it twice. Didn't say anything right away. Aurora was over by the stove, checking the flue. "List's been there a while," she said without turning around. "Someone with too much time on their hands." "Seems specific." She shrugged. "Bored people write weird stuff. I've seen worse at the Salmon Bay cabin. Someone drew a whole comic about a bear breaking in and stealing socks. That was probably true. Isolation did things to people. Still. "You think it's a joke?" I asked. Aurora straightened up and looked at me. "You think it's not?" I didn't answer. Wasn't sure what I thought yet. The rules didn't feel like a joke exactly. They felt personal. The handwriting was too deliberate. And the tape. Someone had checked it recently. Pressed the edges back down. The paper wasn't curling. "Don't answer voices from the trees" wasn't the kind of thing you wrote just to mess with people. Neither was "Tracks invite visitors." Aurora crossed to the table and glanced at the list without much interest. "Look," she said, "out here, people get superstitious. They hear wind in the branches and think it's something else. They see shadows and convince themselves it's normal. You ever follow the rules?" I asked. She paused, then nodded once. "Yeah, doesn't hurt to be cautious." That felt like an answer and a non-answer at the same time. I let it go. I turned back to my pack and started unpacking. Extra clothes went on the shelf above my cot. Food supplies stayed in the pack for now. I pulled out the camera and set it on the table next to the waterproof case with the replacement battery inside. Aurora was doing the same on her side, organizing her gear in neat rows. My boots were still on. I unlaced them and set them next to the stove, close enough to dry if they got wet, but not so close they'd scorch. That's what the list said. Boots stay inside. Aurora noticed, but didn't comment. The light coming through the windows was starting to fade. Wasn't sunset yet, but it was getting there. Maybe another hour of good daylight left. We'd need to check the cache before dark. "Let's get the inspection done," Aurora said. She pulled on a fleece layer and grabbed a headlamp from her pack. "Cache is about 100 yards north. Shouldn't take long." I nodded and grabbed my own jacket. The camera went into my pocket. We stepped back outside and the temperature had dropped a few degrees. The wind was picking up too, coming off the water in uneven gusts. I could hear it moving through the trees behind the cabin, a low rushing sound that rose and fell. Aurora led the way around the side of the cabin and into the woods. There was a trail here, more obvious than the one from the beach. It wound between the trees in a gentle curve, and the ground was soft with moss and old needles. I kept my eyes on the path and tried not to think about the list. The cache was easy to spot. A metal box about the size of a chest freezer, painted forest green and bolted to a wooden platform 6 feet off the ground. There was a ladder leaning against the platform and a padlock hanging open on the latch. Aurora climbed up first. I heard her moving things around inside, counting under her breath. I waited at the bottom and took a few photos of the setup with the camera. The light was dim enough that I wasn't sure how well they'd turn out, but I got the angles Christina would want. "Supplies are low," Aurora called down. "We've got maybe 3 days of canned goods and 1 propane canister. No rice left and the first aid kit's been opened." I made a note on my phone. "Anything missing that shouldn't be?" "No, just used." She climbed back down and I went up to get my own count. She was right. The cache had the basics: canned soup, beans, a box of crackers that hadn't been opened yet, some freeze-dried camping meals, and the propane. The first aid kit had bandages missing and the antiseptic wipe box was half empty. Normal wear. I took another photo and climbed down. We walked back to the cabin without talking much. The wind was louder now and the trees creaked when it hit them. I didn't hear any voices, didn't hear whistling either. Just wind. Inside, Aurora got the stove going and I pulled out the battery case. The broken radio was sitting right there on the table next to a sealed replacement. Someone had left them both out in the open, side by side. I picked up the dead one first. The casing was cracked along one edge and the terminals were corroded. Looked like it had gotten wet and someone had tried to dry it out too late. The replacement was still in shrink wrap with a manufacture date from April. The whole setup felt wrong. Not the batteries themselves, that part made sense, but the way they were arranged, like someone had staged them, like they'd been waiting. I set the broken one down and looked at the new one. We'd swap it out in the morning, log it with a timestamp, take a photo for the report. Standard procedure. Aurora was boiling water for coffee. The stove ticked as it heated up and the light through the windows had gone orange and thin. I couldn't shake the feeling that the broken radio had been sitting there too long, that whoever left it had known we were coming, that the whole assignment was set up for something I didn't understand yet. Probably nothing. Probably just the isolation getting to me already. But I kept thinking about the list, about boots and tracks and voices. I kept thinking about the way Aurora had said yeah when I asked if she followed the rules. Outside, the wind picked up again. I heard something creak on the porch. Just the boards settling, just the weather. I told myself that. Didn't quite believe it. The light was almost gone now. We had maybe 10 minutes before full dark. I glanced at the door and confirmed the porch light was off. It was. Aurora poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed me one without asking if I wanted it. I took it. The heat felt good against my palms. "Long day tomorrow," she said. "Get some sleep when you can." I nodded. Didn't mention that I probably wouldn't sleep much. The broken battery sat on the table between us, cracked and useless and waiting. The new one sat beside it, still sealed. The setup felt like a problem. I just didn't know what kind yet. Dark came on fast after that. Dusk dropped fast. I was still sitting at the table with the tin cup when the radio on the shelf near the door crackled once, loud enough that I flinched. Aurora didn't move, just kept her coffee raised halfway to her mouth. Static hissed for maybe 3 seconds. Then Christina's voice came through, clipped and clear. "Cooper. George, this is Lewis. Do you copy?" Aurora set her cup down and walked over to the shelf. She picked up the radio, pressed the side button. "Copy. This is George." "Weather's moving in faster than predicted," Christina said. Her tone hadn't changed from the morning briefing. Procedural, like she was reading off a checklist. "Jimmy can't make the run back tonight. Pickup is delayed to 0700 tomorrow. Acknowledge." Aurora glanced at me. I nodded. She pressed the button again. "Acknowledged. We're secure." "Stay put," Christina said. "Keep the radio on channel 6. Don't wander off site after dark. Confirm you have adequate shelter and supplies." "Confirmed," Aurora said. "Good. Lewis out." The channel went quiet. Aurora set the radio back on the shelf. but didn't move away from it. I looked at the windows. Still some light left outside, but not much. Maybe 20 minutes. The trees were already dark shapes against gray sky. I figured the weather thing made sense. September storms came in hard, and Jimmy wasn't the type to take risks with a skiff in rough water. Staying another night wasn't ideal, but it wasn't a disaster either. We had food, we had the stove, the cabin was solid enough. Aurora returned to the table and picked up her coffee. She didn't drink it, just held it. "Probably smart," I said. "If it's going to blow." "Probably." I waited for her to say something else, but she didn't. She was looking at the radio again, not staring exactly, just aware of it. Less than a minute passed, maybe 40 seconds. The radio crackled again. This time the voice that came through was Aurora's. I'm not joking. It sounded exactly like her. Same low tone, same coastal cadence, same flatness she used when she was trying to keep something calm. "Jackson," the voice said, "come down to the dock, right now." I looked at Aurora. She was standing 3 feet from me holding a tin cup with both hands. Her mouth was closed. She wasn't touching the radio. The voice on the radio said my name again. "Jackson, you need to come down to the dock immediately." Aurora set the cup on the table, slow. Didn't take her eyes off the radio. I stood up, crossed to the shelf in 2 steps and picked up the radio. My hand was steady. I pressed the button. "Repeat last transmission," I said. Static for a second. Then the voice came back. Calmer this time. Almost irritated. "Jackson, come to the dock, now." It was her voice. I'd heard Aurora talk enough times to know the shape of her words, the way she dropped consonants at the end of sentences, the slight rasp when she gave instructions. But Aurora was right there, watching me, not speaking. I pressed the button again. "Who is this?" Nothing. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. The channel dropped dead. Not static, just silence. Like whoever was holding the button on the other end let go and walked away. I set the radio down on the shelf. My heart was doing something I didn't like. Fast, but uneven. I turned around. Aurora was still by the table. She hadn't moved except to let go of the cup. "That wasn't me," she said. "I know. Someone's got a radio." "Yeah." She looked at the door, then the windows, then back at me. "Could be someone screwing around," she said. Didn't sound like she believed it. I didn't answer. I was thinking about the list, about the boots and the voices and the whistling, about the way Aurora said she followed the rules because caution didn't hurt. "We should lock the door," I said. Aurora nodded once. She walked to the door and turned the deadbolt. It slid into place with a solid click. Old hardware, but it worked. She checked the handle. Locked. "Windows," I said. "They latch from inside." She moved to the nearest one and flipped the metal latch down. Did the same with the other 2. None of them had curtains thick enough to block our silhouettes if we had a light on, but I figured that didn't matter. If someone was out there, they already knew we were here. I went back to the table and looked at the list taped to the wall. Read it again, even though I'd already memorized it. Keep porch light off after dark. Don't answer voices from the trees. Never follow whistling. Boots stay inside because tracks invite visitors. If you hear knocking, wait until morning. Aurora came back to the table. She looked at the list, too. "We follow it," she said. "Yeah." "Porch light's already off." "Yeah." She pulled her fleece tighter. It wasn't cold inside. The stove was still going, but I got it. I sat down. My boots were near the stove where I'd left them earlier. I thought about putting them on. If we had to move fast in the dark, I'd rather have boots than socks. But the list said boots stay inside. Tracks invite visitors. I left them where they were. Aurora sat across from me. She picked up her coffee again, but it had gone cold. She drank it anyway. Outside, the wind picked up. I could hear it in the trees. A low, steady sound that made the cabin boards creak in places. Nothing unusual. Just weather. Then I heard the whistle. Low. Drifting in from the direction of the shoreline. Could have been wind through a gap in the rocks. Could have been a bird I didn't recognize. Could have been a person standing down by the dock with a radio and a sick sense of humor. I looked at Aurora. She heard it too. I could tell by the way her jaw tightened. We didn't answer it. We didn't get up. We didn't go to the window. The whistle came again. Same pitch. Same direction. Then it stopped. I waited. Counted to 30 in my head. Nothing else. Aurora set her cup down. "We're staying inside," she said. Quiet. Firm. "Yeah, no matter what we hear." "Okay." She nodded, looked at the door again, like she was making sure the lock was still holding even though we'd just checked it. I stood up and went to the nearest window. Didn't get close. Just looked at the latch to confirm it was down. It was. The glass was dark now. Full night outside. I couldn't see the trees anymore. Couldn't see the beach. Just my own reflection and the dim orange glow from the stove behind me. "I'm checking the porch," Aurora said. "I'll go." "We'll both go." She moved to the door, and I followed. She unlocked the deadbolt, opened the door 6 inches, and looked out. I stood behind her and looked over her shoulder. The porch was empty. 2 steps down to the path. Trees maybe 15 feet past that. Everything else was black. The kind of dark you get on islands with no light pollution and heavy cloud cover. I couldn't see the dock. Couldn't see the water. Couldn't see anything past the edge of the porch boards. Aurora pulled the door shut and locked it again. "Nothing," she said. "Yeah," but I didn't feel better. The porch being empty didn't mean much when you couldn't see past it. I went back to the table and sat down. Aurora stayed by the door for another minute. Then she walked to her cot and sat on the edge. She didn't lie down, just sat there with her hands on her knees. I looked at my boots again. They were right there, 10 feet away. Easy to grab if I needed them, but the list said keep them inside. Tracks invite visitors. I thought about that, about what it meant. If I wore boots outside, I'd leave prints in the mud and sand. Someone could follow them back, could know exactly where I'd gone and when, could stand outside the door and know I was inside because the tracks led here and didn't lead away. I left the boots where they were. The wind pushed against the cabin. Not hard, just steady. I heard something creak on the porch again. Same sound as earlier. Could have been the board settling. Could have been the roof shifting. Could have been weight on the top step. I didn't get up to check. Aurora was watching the door. I was watching the windows. Neither of us said anything. The radio sat on the shelf. Silent now. Christina said to keep it on channel 6. We were doing that. But I didn't trust it anymore. It had lied once. Used Aurora's voice to call me down to the dock when Aurora was standing right next to me. If it could lie about that, it could lie about anything. I thought about Christina's transmission, the weather warning, the delayed pickup. It sounded like her. Same clipped tone, same procedural phrasing, but I hadn't seen her face. Hadn't confirmed it was actually her on the other end. Maybe that one was real and the second one was fake. Maybe both were fake. Maybe someone was out there with a radio and a recording and a plan I didn't understand yet. I didn't know. Couldn't know. Not until morning when Jimmy either showed up or didn't. Aurora lay down on her cot. Didn't take off her fleece. Didn't get under the blanket. Just lay on top of it with her boots still on and her eyes open. I stayed at the table. The stove was warm. The cabin was quiet except for the wind and the creaking. My coffee was cold, but I didn't care. The night felt like it was setting a trap. Something out there wanted me on the dock. Wanted me outside. wanted me moving in the dark without boots. Or with boots, or maybe it didn't matter because either way I'd be exposed. The radio had already proved it could lie. I wasn't going anywhere. Around midnight, the rain kept going, but the forest went quiet in a way that felt wrong. I'd been sitting near the stove for hours. My back hurt from the wooden chair. Aurora had taken the cot near the door and told me to get some sleep, but I couldn't, so I stayed where I was with my hands around a cup that had gone cold sometime before 11. The rain hit the roof steady and hard, normal September storm, but underneath it there was nothing else. No wind in the trees, no branches scraping, no small animals moving through the underbrush or settling into their dens for the night. Just rain on metal and wood, and silence everywhere else. I kept waiting for something to break it. An owl, maybe, or a raven calling from the ridge. Even the sound of water dripping off the eaves would have been fine. But there was nothing. The forest had shut down completely. I set the cup on the table and leaned back in the chair. The stove ticked next to me, cooling down from the last log I'd fed it maybe 20 minutes earlier. I should have added another. The temperature was dropping, but I didn't move. I just sat there listening to the rain and the quiet and trying to convince myself it was normal. It wasn't normal. I'd done enough field assignments by now to know what the woods were supposed to sound like at night. Even in bad weather, there was always something. Mice in the walls, branches settling, the creak of trees shifting their weight. This wasn't that. This was the kind of silence that made you hold your breath without meaning to. I checked the windows, still latched, door still locked, boots still by the stove where I'd left them, porch light off. We'd followed every rule on the list. Didn't matter. I couldn't relax. Aurora shifted on the cot and I glanced over. She was on her side facing the wall, one arm tucked under the thin pillow. Her breathing had evened out maybe an hour ago and I'd figured she was asleep. Good for her. One of us should be. I looked back at the stove and thought about adding wood. My hands felt stiff. I flexed my fingers and stood up slow, trying not to make the chair scrape. That's when Aurora spoke. "You hear it too." Her voice was quiet, not a question. I turned and she was still facing the wall, hadn't moved at all. "Yeah," I said. She sat up and swung her legs off the cot. Her boots were on. I had noticed that earlier. She must have laced them back up after we locked down for the night. Aurora rubbed her face with both hands and looked at the door, then the windows, then me. "This kind of silence," she said, "usually means the animals are hiding from something." I nodded. Didn't ask what. Didn't need to. She stood and walked to the table, pulled out the other chair, and sat down across from where I'd been. She didn't look tired, just alert. The way you get when your body decides sleep isn't the priority anymore. "Could be a bear," I said. Didn't believe it, but I said it anyway. Aurora shook her head once. "Bear moves through, animals go quiet for a minute. Then they start up again. This has been going for a while." "Yeah." She looked at the list on the wall. Read it again even though we both had it memorized by now. Then she looked back at me. "We stay inside," she said. "I know." "No matter what?" "I know." She nodded and leaned back in the chair. Her hands rested flat on the table. Steady. I sat back down across from her and we waited. The smell hit maybe 10 minutes later. It came in slow. I didn't notice it at first. Then I did, and I couldn't stop noticing it. Crushed alder leaves. I recognized that part right away. Sharp and green and bitter, the way they smell when you step on them after rain. But underneath it there was something else. Something sweet and wrong. Rotten fruit maybe. Or meat that had been left out in the heat too long. The two smells didn't belong together, but there they were, seeping in through the gaps around the door and the window frames. Aurora's nose wrinkled. She smelled it too. I didn't say anything, just breathed through my mouth and tried not to think about what could make a smell like that. Then the scraping started. Soft at first, so soft I thought I was imagining it. but it kept going, slow and steady, dragging across the porch boards from left to right, then back again, left to right, over and over. It sounded like fingernails on wet wood. My chest tightened. I looked at Aurora, and she was staring at the door with her jaw set and her hands still flat on the table. She didn't move, didn't tell me it was fine or that it was probably just a branch. The scraping continued. Same rhythm, same pressure, like someone testing the surface, feeling it out. I stood up, didn't plan to. Just did. Aurora's eyes flicked to me, but she didn't say anything. I crossed to the nearest window, the one facing the porch. My hands were shaking a little, so I shoved them in my pockets. The curtain was just a bedsheet tied with paracord. Thin. I could see the faint glow of rain through it, but nothing else. The scraping kept going. I reached up and lifted the curtain, just a fraction, just enough to see. The darkness outside was complete. No moon, no stars, just black and rain and the faint outline of the porch railing. And then I saw it. A pale oval, too close to the glass, right where a face should be. No features, no eyes or mouth or nose, just a smooth, pale shape pressed up against the window, watching. I dropped the curtain. My heart was going hard now, fast and uneven. I stepped back from the window and turned to Aurora. "There's something out there," I said. Kept my voice level. Didn't try to make it sound worse than it was. Just told her. "What did you see?" she asked. Still sitting, still calm. A face, I think. Right against the glass. She stood up then. Didn't go to the window. Just stood and looked at me for a long second. Then she crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed my wrist. Hard. Her fingers dug in and I felt the pressure all the way to the bone. "Stop," she said. I blinked. "What?" "Stop hunting proof." Her voice was low and tight. "Focus on surviving." I didn't argue. Didn't pull away. She was right. I knew she was right. She let go of my wrist and walked to the door. The lockbox key was hanging on a small hook next to the frame. We hadn't touched it since we got here. Didn't need to. The box was bolted shut, and we didn't have a reason to open it. Aurora took the key off the hook and slipped it into her jacket pocket. "Why?" I asked. "In case we need to move fast," she said. I looked at the lockbox, tried to remember what was usually in those things. Flares, maybe. Emergency radio, first aid supplies. Nothing that would help us right now. But Aurora pocketed the key anyway. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. I looked at the list again, and the handwriting didn't look like a joke anymore. It looked like instructions, practical ones, written by someone who'd been exactly where we were now. The scraping outside stopped. I waited, counted to 10, then 20. Nothing. Aurora stayed by the door. I stayed by the window. We didn't talk, didn't move. The rain kept falling. The stove kept ticking. And somewhere outside in the dark, whatever had been on the porch was still there, waiting for us to make one wrong choice. The radio crackled maybe 3 minutes after the scraping stopped. I'd been counting my breaths to keep track of time. Somewhere around 60 breaths in, the static came back. Then Christina's voice cut through, clean and clipped. "Cooper, George, this is Lewis. Weather window opening at 0500. Float plane inbound for emergency pickup from the bay. Be ready at first light with all gear. Acknowledge." Aurora looked at me from her position by the door. I looked at the radio on the shelf. Christina's voice again. "Cooper, George, acknowledge." Aurora crossed to the shelf and picked up the radio but didn't press the button yet. She held it close to her ear like she was listening for something underneath the words. I understood that. I was doing the same thing. The transmission sounded exactly like Christina. Same routine tone, same procedural phrasing, same impatience when she had to repeat herself. It even had that slight distortion from the district office radio she always used, the one with the busted squelch that made everything sound a little compressed. That's what bugged me. It was too normal, too perfectly what you'd expect to hear. I'd heard the fake Aurora maybe an hour ago. That one had her voice, her cadence, her exact way of dropping consonants at the end of instructions, but it hadn't been her. She'd been standing 3 feet away holding a coffee cup. Now this transmission had Christina's voice, Christina's phrasing, Christina's everything, and I had no way to confirm she was actually in the district office 20 miles across open water and not standing outside in the dark with a radio. Aurora pressed the button. George acknowledging. Float plane pickup 0500 bay location. All gear ready. She released the button and waited. Confirmed, Christina's voice said. Weather deteriorating after 0600. Do not miss this window. Lewis out. The radio went silent. Aurora set it back on the shelf and turned to me. Her face looked tired, not scared, just tired in that specific way people get when they've been managing a bad situation for too long. I said, we shouldn't go. Aurora nodded once, but didn't agree out loud. I kept going. That could be the same thing that copied your voice. It wants us out of the cabin, wants us in the open or on the water. Aurora said, could be. So we ignore it. We stay inside until actual daylight and then we reassess. Aurora walked back to the table and sat down. She looked at the 2 batteries sitting there between us. The broken one with the cracked casing and corroded terminals, the sealed replacement still in shrink wrap. She said, if that was really Christina, and we don't show up, we miss the only pickup before the weather turns. I said, if it wasn't Christina, we walk straight into whatever's out there. Yeah. Aurora picked up the broken battery and turned it over in her hands. Water damage all through the casing, terminals green with corrosion. This thing had been dead for weeks, maybe months, and the replacement had been sitting here waiting with an April date stamped on the shrink wrap. Someone knew we'd be here, knew we'd need to replace this battery, staged it so we'd have the task but not the working equipment to report back. Aurora set the battery down. If we miss a real pickup, we're stuck here with no working radio and a storm coming. Christina said weather closes after 0600. That's real. I checked the marine forecast yesterday. Low pressure system moving in from the Gulf. By tomorrow night, this whole area is going to be socked in for days. I said, we have supplies. For maybe 4 days if we're careful. The cash is low. You saw it. I had 3 days of canned goods, 1 propane canister, opened first aid kit missing half the bandages. Aurora kept going. Her voice stayed level, but I could hear the edge underneath. If we're here a week with no comms, Christina's gonna assume something went wrong. She'll send someone eventually, but not until the weather clears. That could be 10 days, 2 weeks. I didn't say anything. She was right, and we both knew it. Aurora said, and if that transmission was real and we ignore it, we're the seasonal employees who didn't follow instructions during an emergency pickup. Christina will document that. You know she will. I knew she would. Christina documented everything. Every missed radio check, every late report, every deviation from procedure. She'd called me at 6 a.m. for schedule changes and sent me to verify work that didn't need verifying just to keep a paper trail. If we ignored a legitimate emergency pickup order, that'd be the kind of thing that ended contracts. Not just mine, Aurora's too. But if we walked out there into the fog and the thing that had scraped the porch was waiting, Aurora said, we're stuck. That was it exactly. Stuck between rules that said don't answer voices and don't go outside, and job reality that said you follow supervisor instructions or you lose your position. I looked at the list taped above the table, the thick black marker, the yellowed tape edges that someone had pressed down recently. Don't answer voices from the trees. Never follow whistling. If you hear knocking, wait until morning. Boots stay inside because tracks invite visitors. I said, "We go, but we follow the list." Aurora looked at me. "How?" "Boots inside, we carry them. Walk in socks. Don't leave clear tracks." Aurora thought about that. Her jaw worked to one side. Then she nodded. "Treat it like field guidance." "Yeah." She stood up and started gathering her gear, rolled her sleeping pad tight and strapped it to her pack, checked the rifle case was secure, pulled on her fleece even though the cabin was warm from the stove. I packed my own stuff, extra clothes into the pack, camera and waterproof battery case into the outer pocket. Food stayed separated in a stuff sack. I pulled everything tight and clipped the compression straps. The whole time I kept thinking about that transmission. Christina's voice. Too perfect, too routine. But also maybe real. That's what made it worse. Not knowing. Aurora picked up both batteries from the table and put them in her jacket pockets. The broken one on the left. The replacement on the right. Then she took the handheld radio from the shelf and clipped it to her belt. She said, "We move fast, straight to the dock, no stopping." I said, "Okay." She checked her watch. "First lights in 20 minutes. We leave in 15. I pulled my boots on to tie the laces tight, then took them off again and held them in one hand. My socks were thick wool. They'd get wet and probably torn up on the trail, but they wouldn't leave boot prints. Aurora watched me do this. Then she did the same thing. Laced her boots tight, pulled them off, held them in her left hand. We waited the last 15 minutes standing by the door. The rain had stopped outside. I couldn't hear anything beyond the cabin walls. No wind, no branches, no animal sounds, just that same wrong silence. Aurora unlocked the deadbolt at exactly 04:45. Gray light was just starting to show through the windows. Not sunrise, just the sky getting less dark. She opened the door, slow, looked left, then right, then stepped out onto the porch in her socks. I followed her out and pulled the door shut behind me but didn't lock it. Didn't seem like the kind of thing that mattered anymore. The porch boards were wet and cold under my feet. I didn't look down to check for scratches, didn't want to see them. Aurora went down the steps and I stayed close behind her. We crossed the clearing in front of the cabin, walking carefully to avoid sharp rocks and broken sticks. The ground was soft from rain, moss and pine needles. My socks soaked through in the first 10 steps. The tree line started maybe 30 feet from the cabin. Aurora led us into it on the same trail we'd used yesterday to check the cache. Narrow path, moss and dirt, roots across it in places. I kept my eyes on Aurora's back and my boots in my right hand. The pack pulled at my shoulders. Rifle case strapped across Aurora's back shifted when she moved. We passed the cache platform, kept going toward the beach. That's when the fog hit. Not gradual, just suddenly there, thick and white and flat, filling the spaces between trees and erasing everything past 10 feet. I could see Aurora in front of me, could see the immediate tree trunks on either side of the trail. Everything else disappeared. The bay was close, maybe 100 yards. I could smell salt water and seaweed and wet wood from the dock. Then I heard the engine. Far out, low and steady, float-equipped plane, probably a beaver or an otter, throttled down for approach. I stopped walking. Aurora stopped too. We both listened. The engine sound grew a little louder, then leveled off, then started to fade like the plane was circling or drifting with the current. Then I lost it completely. Just fog and silence and the smell of salt water. Aurora turned to look at me. Her face was gray in the dim light. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just stood there in our socks on the trail, holding our boots, listening to nothing. The radio spat static so loud I flinched even though I'd been holding it in my hand for the last 30 seconds. Aurora's head snapped toward me. Then Christina's voice came through, clear and urgent. "Cooper, George, plane is on final approach. Need you visible at the shoreline. Wave them in. I looked at Aurora. She looked at the radio. Neither of us moved. Christina's voice again, sharper this time. Acknowledge. Aurora reached over and took the radio from my hand. She pressed the button. George here. Copy. She didn't say we'd do it, just that she heard. Christina signed off. The channel went silent. Aurora handed the radio back to me and I clipped it to my belt. My socks were already soaked through from the sand and I could feel every cold grain under my feet. The fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it had gotten thicker, sitting low over the water in a solid gray wall that cut visibility down to maybe 40 feet. Waving doesn't even make sense for a plane, Aurora said. Her voice was flat, practical. Pilots looking for the bay, for the dock, not for people on the shore. I nodded. That was true. Float planes didn't need ground crew waving them in. They needed coordinates and a clear stretch of water. That was it. Aurora turned toward the tree line, then back to the water. Signaling might matter in ways we don't understand. The way she said it made my chest tighten. Not like she was guessing, like she'd worked something out and didn't want to say it directly. I looked down at the sand. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Bare footprints, deep and heavy with sharp edges pressed into the wet sand where the tide had pulled back. They came from the tree line in a straight line, crossed the beach, and stopped right at the waterline. Then another set ran parallel, heading back toward the trees. Fresh. The edges were clean. No erosion from wind or water yet. I'd been watching the ground the whole walk down from the cabin, checking for roots and rocks because my socks were thin and every stick jabbed straight through to my heel. I would have seen prints this obvious. These weren't here 2 minutes ago, and they definitely weren't ours. I wore a men's size 10. Aurora probably wore a 7 or 8. These were bigger, longer. The toes were spread wide like whoever made them had been walking barefoot for years and their feet had flattened out. The heel strikes were so deep they'd punched through the top layer of sand into the darker, wet layer underneath. Aurora. She turned, followed my eyes, stopped talking. We both stared at the prints for a few seconds, maybe 5, maybe 10. They stopped exactly at the waterline, right where the last wave had left a thin line of foam and broken kelp. Like whatever made them had walked straight into the bay and kept going, or stepped in and vanished. I crouched down without thinking, got close enough to see the details. No arch. The ball of the foot was wide and the toes were long, human-shaped, but wrong in a way I couldn't name. Aurora grabbed my shoulder and pulled me back up. Don't touch them. I hadn't planned to. But I also hadn't planned to crouch down next to them like I was investigating a trail marker. The fog shifted. I looked up. There was a shape moving through it, low over the water, maybe 100 feet out. It had the outline of a float plane, wings, pontoons, a fuselage. But it was like looking at a sketch someone had drawn from memory and gotten almost right. The proportions were off. The wings were too narrow. The pontoons sat too low. And the whole thing moved wrong, smooth and steady. No bounce or drift from wind, no correction in the glide path. No engine sound. Float planes are loud, especially on approach. You hear them coming from a mile out, that deep growl of the engine throttling back, the props biting air. This thing was silent, just the fog moving around it, pulling and bending, like it was being dragged through water instead of air. I couldn't see the cockpit, couldn't see if there was a pilot, just the shape sliding through the gray. The radio crackled again. Cooper, George, I need you out where the plane can see you. Now. Move to the shoreline and signal. Christina's voice. Exactly the same. Procedural. Impatient. The kind of tone she used when she was managing a situation and didn't have time for questions. Aurora was staring at the shape in the fog. Her jaw was tight and her hand was still on my shoulder. I looked at the footprints again, at the tree line, at the dock behind us. Then I looked at the cabin, barely visible now through the fog and the trees, maybe 60 feet uphill from where we stood. The list. Keep porch light off after dark. Don't answer voices from the trees. Never follow whistling. Boots stay inside because tracks invite visitors. If you hear knocking, wait until morning. Those weren't jokes. They weren't superstition from bored seasonal employees trying to freak out the next crew. They were survival instructions. And Christina had sent us here anyway. She'd assigned this trip, picked the timing, paired me with Aurora specifically, handed over the key and the coordinates and told us it'd be 1 or 2 nights depending on weather. She knew about Ella Bay. She had to. You didn't write rules that specific unless people had learned them the hard way. Unless the Forest Service had a file somewhere with incident reports and missing person cases and explanations that didn't add up. Christina knew this place was wrong, and she sent us here with a broken radio battery and a replacement that had been staged on the table like bait. Aurora moved. Fast. She pulled the new battery from her right jacket pocket, snapped it onto the handheld radio still clipped to my belt, and twisted the volume knob all the way down until it was nearly silent. I could still see the channel indicator glowing green, still transmitting, but no sound came through. Then she reached into her left pocket and pulled out the broken battery, held it in both hands, looked at it for a second like she was weighing something. She turned and walked toward the end of the dock. Her socks left wet prints on the weathered boards. She moved carefully, testing each plank before putting her weight down, and I realized she was making sure the dock would hold, that she wouldn't fall through. At the far end, right where the dock met open water, she crouched down and set the broken battery on the boards. Gently, like she was placing an offering at a shrine. I understood what she was doing about half a second too late. Aurora. I stepped forward, reached for her. The air tightened. That's the only way I can describe it. Like the pressure changed all at once. Like the whole bay took a breath inward and held it. The fog pulled closer, thicker. It didn't drift. It moved with intention, sliding in from the water and wrapping around the dock pilings and creeping up onto the sand. Aurora stood up slowly and backed away from the battery. 3 steps. 4. She didn't turn around, just kept her eyes on the water. The shape in the fog was closer now, maybe 50 feet out. I could see the wings more clearly. They didn't move, didn't tilt or adjust. The whole thing just glided forward in a straight line, pontoons skimming the surface of the water without making a wake. No ripples, no spray, nothing. My hand was still outstretched toward Aurora. She glanced at it, then at me, and shook her head once. Don't. I dropped my arm. The bay pressed inward again. I felt it in my chest, in my ears, like standing too close to a speaker before the sound kicks in. Aurora took another step back. Her boot was still in her left hand, laces tied tight. She hadn't put it down once. The radio on my belt vibrated. I looked down and saw the channel indicator flashing. Someone was transmitting, but the volume was down and I couldn't hear what they were saying. I didn't turn it up. Aurora's eyes were still locked on the shape in the fog, on the dock, on the broken battery sitting at the end like a marker. The air stayed tight, the fog stayed close, and the shape kept coming. The pull hit me low in my chest, not like thinking about moving forward, like something already decided I would, and my body was just catching up. I'd felt it once before, when I crouched down to look at the footprints in the sand. Right before Aurora grabbed my shoulder and pulled me back. This time, she couldn't reach me. She was still 3 steps away on the dock, boots in her left hand, eyes locked on the shape sliding through the fog. I took half a step toward the water. Aurora's head snapped toward me. Her eyes went wide and she moved fast, waving her free hand hard in a cutting motion. Not just stop, more like get out. She mouthed something I couldn't hear over the pressure in my ears and pointed back toward the cabin with her whole arm extended. Run. I understood that part. I reached for her anyway, grabbed her forearm to pull her with me. Her skin was cold, not damp morning cold or wind off the water cold. Cold like meat from a freezer, like something that hadn't been warm in hours. I let go on reflex, and she didn't react, didn't look at me, didn't pull away. Her face went slack, mouth open just slightly, eyes still fixed on the shape in the fog but not focused anymore, not tracking it, listening. That's what it looked like. She was hearing something I couldn't, and whatever it was louder than me saying her name, louder than my hand on her arm, louder than anything I could do to pull her back. I said her name again. Aurora. Nothing. The shape was maybe 30 feet out now, wings still too narrow, pontoons still too low, no engine sound at all. I made the choice. I let go, turned, and ran. My socks hit wet sand and I didn't care about the rocks anymore. Didn't care about anything except getting back to the cabin and slamming that door and throwing the deadbolt before whatever was out there decided I was more interesting than Aurora. Probably cost her. I knew that even while I was running. Probably cost her the second I let go. Behind me I heard a wet slap. Heavy, like a salmon hitting a dock after a bad throw. Then a long exhale that didn't match the wind or the fog or anything natural I'd ever heard in 6 months of field work. It sounded patient. I didn't look back, not yet. Just kept my eyes on the tree line and the gap between the alders where the trail cut through. My pack bounced hard against my spine, and the boots in my hand smacked my thigh with every step. The trail was soft. Moss and needles turned to mud from the rain. My socks slid and I went down on one knee, caught myself with my free hand, kept moving. Cabin was 60 feet uphill, 50, 40. I hit the porch steps, and that's when I looked back. Through the trees I could see the end of the dock. The shape was there now, tall. Taller than it should have been if it was a plane, and it wasn't a plane anymore, or maybe it never was. It bent the fog around itself, not like wind moving through, like the fog was avoiding it, pulling back to make space. The shape leaned down close to Aurora's head, too close, like it was smelling her hair or tasting the air near her mouth. Sampling her breath, that's what it looked like. Aurora didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, with her boots still in her left hand and her face still slack and empty. Then she stepped off the dock. Not a slip, not a stumble. One deliberate step into open water. She went under to her knees, then her waist, then her chest. The fog closed around her and she kept walking with steady purpose like she was following a trail only she could see. No struggle, no sound, just gone. I didn't wait to see if she'd come back up. I turned, crossed the porch in 2 steps, shoved the door open, slammed it shut behind me, and threw the deadbolt so hard the frame shook. Then I sat down on the floor with my back pressed against the door, and my knees pulled up and my boots still clutched in both hands. The radio was still clipped to my belt, with the volume turned almost all the way down. The channel indicator glowed green. I could hear faint static if I held my breath. I didn't touch it. The windows were still latched. Curtains still tied with paracord. Stove still ticking from last night's fire. I watched the window facing the porch. Didn't lift the curtain. Just watched the shape of it and the gray light coming through the bedsheet fabric. The silence came back, heavy this time. Pressed down on the roof and the walls and my chest until I had to focus on breathing in and out at a normal rhythm so I wouldn't hyperventilate. No wind, no branches, no rain. Just the cabin and me and whatever was outside. The whistle started maybe 10 minutes later, low, patient. Same pitch as before, coming from somewhere near the porch but not on it. Maybe 5 feet out, maybe 10. I didn't move. The whistle came again, closer this time, right at the wall next to the door. Then a voice, Aurora's voice. She said my name. Jackson. Said she was freezing. Said she needed to come in. Same flat tone. Same cadence. Same slight rasp at the end of sentences. I stayed put. Didn't answer. Didn't get up. Didn't touch the deadbolt. The voice said it again. Jackson, I'm freezing. Let me in. I looked down at my boots, still tied tight. Laces double knotted the way I always did them. I held them against my chest so I wouldn't put them down. Wouldn't be tempted to put them on. Wouldn't leave prints if I had to move fast. The voice kept talking for a while. Maybe an hour. Maybe 2. I stopped listening to the words and just waited for it to stop. Eventually it did. 2 days later, the skiff came in. I heard the engine first. Real engine. Sputtering and uneven and backfiring once when it throttled down. I was still inside. Still had my boots in my lap. The radio battery had died sometime during the first night and I hadn't replaced it. Didn't need to. I looked through the window without lifting the curtain and saw the skiff bump against the dock. 3 people. Christina got out first. Then a guy I didn't know with neat hair and rectangular glasses. Then a woman with a ponytail and a clipped-on ID badge. I put my boots on, laced them up, opened the door. Christina saw me and walked up the trail without calling out. The other 2 followed. She stopped at the porch steps and looked at me. Her face didn't change. Where's George? She said. I told her Aurora went into the water at the dock 2 days ago and didn't come back up. Christina nodded once, didn't ask why, didn't ask what happened before that, didn't ask if I tried to stop her. The guy with glasses wrote something on a clipboard. The woman looked at the cabin, then at me, then back at Christina. Christina said the paperwork would say Aurora slipped at the dock during the pickup. Weather conditions, wet boards, unfortunate but not uncommon. She asked if I understood. I said yes. Christina walked past me into the cabin. I stayed on the porch with the other 2. Neither of them said anything. Through the door I could see Christina moving around inside. She picked up the broken radio battery from the table, put it in her jacket pocket, checked the shelves, looked at the stove. Then she stopped in front of the list taped to the wall. She pulled it down carefully, folded it twice, put it in her other pocket like routine documentation. When she came back out, she told me to get my gear. I grabbed my pack from inside. Everything was still there. Camera, waterproof case, extra clothes. We walked down to the skiff in a line. Christina first, then me, then the guy with glasses, then the woman. Nobody looked at the sand. I climbed into the skiff and sat on the bench near the back. My socks were still wet inside my boots. I hadn't changed them. The guy with glasses started the engine. The woman untied the line. Christina sat across from me and didn't say anything for the first 20 minutes. Then she asked if I had any questions about the report. I said no. She said good. Said I'd be reassigned to office work for the rest of the season. Said it was standard procedure after an incident. I looked back at the bay as we pulled away. The fog was still there, thicker now, covering the dock and the beach and the cabin. I understood something I hadn't before. The list wasn't a joke, wasn't superstition. Boots stay inside because tracks invite visitors. I'd kept my boots in my hands the whole time. Hadn't put them down. Hadn't left prints inside the cabin or on the porch after I ran back. Aurora had left wet sock prints on the dock, all the way to the end, right to where she put the battery down, right to where the shape leaned close and sampled her breath. Maybe that's what it needed, a trail to follow, permission to come closer. Maybe keeping my boots off the ground was the only reason I made it back. I didn't ask Christina if that was true. I just rode back to Ketchikan in wet socks with my boots on and my pack between my knees, watching the water and the fog and the islands slide past until the harbor came into view.